Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to my late night space. It is, in fact, midnight, a little bit after on the East Coast. It's not too late where I am right now. I'm sorry I was a little bit late in watching Trump's announcement. Was, I had a great conversation actually with someone for a few hours, and then I did a little workout, and I saw some notifications, about Trump announcing his candidacy and so on, which wasn't really a big surprise. I think it would have been a shock if he hadn't done it. Everything was pointing towards that. And then I sat down and watched the thing, and I have to say, I was definitely unimpressed. I mean, I think the the take that I have on this is that this really is a different character we're seeing. Now, there's probably a lot that could explain that away. First off, the atmosphere. He announced at Mar-a-Lago in 2015, in June 2015, he announced at the Trump Hotel. He came down the Golden Escalator. There was supposedly many people who were paid to be there. They kind of filled out his ranks. But nevertheless, and it was at midday, nevertheless, he was up for it. And, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. I learned that from watching Head and Shoulders commercials in the 1980s. And he defined his entire campaign with those lines about they're sending rapists and murderers, and some of whom I assume are good people. And he created that effect of activating his own base, a base that maybe he didn't think he would have when he first decided to do this. He defined his campaign and he created his campaign as a kind of train wreck that the media could not take its eyes off. The media was, Trump was the greatest thing that ever happened to mainstream media. I mean, he says this all the time, and it's absolutely true. They would just simply leave the camera on covering rallies. I think there was some famous or infamous instance in which they were covering an empty podium, waiting for Trump to speak and not covering a discussion of policy by Hillary Clinton. You just couldn't take your eyes off it. It was that much of a train wreck. It was that exciting. You wouldn't know what he was going to say. You couldn't believe the wacky craziness that came out of his mouth. And who knows, something even more grotesque might occur. So he has, at least judging by things tonight, he has lost that touch. And I think that is really damaging. The thesis that I laid out after the midterms was effectively that the GOP does in fact need Trump. Now, I am no longer on the Trump train. I will not vote for him, and I certainly won't support him or be part of some, movement that's basically a Trump cheerleading squad. I'm out. But you could say that I can see these things objectively. There is this narrative that is grounded in a certain reality that the GOP needs to dump Trump. They just need to get rid of this guy. He's a drag. Look at it. All of the 2020 was stolen candidates lost, each and every one of them. Even this kind of baby Trump waiting in the wings or mama Trump waiting in the wings in Carrie Lake. She lost too, and she defined her candidacy on 2020, basically. So you could make and I could go on in that. Herschel Walker underperformed. The governor of Georgia, he's in a runoff right now. That didn't need to happen. I could go on. Oz seemed to be kind of picked by Trump as the televangelist running for president, very Trumpian in a way, even though that wasn't really his message during the campaign. So you could make this argument that Trump is just a drag on the party. Republicans didn't actually do that well in Congress in 2016. They lost in 2018. They gave the trifecta to the Democrats in 2020. And then 2022 was a mixed bag, to be fair, but basically it was a massive disappointment. They were expecting to just wipe the floor with the Democrats, red tsunami all the way. None of that happened. So you can make a very good case that the GOP just needs to get rid of Trump. My rejoinder to that is that the GOP without Trump is basically a collection of very unpopular policies. Do you know what all really outperformed in 2022? Abortion rights. And Trump's fundamental legacy is appointing these Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe v. Wade. Do you know what also really lifted the Democrats? Student loan forgiveness. That is absolutely popular. The idea that the American public is just fed up and furious at the notion of infrastructure, public spending, COVID, personal bailouts, if you want to call them monthly payments, that they just don't want any of that. And they want their old Reagan economy back. That is ridiculous. That is simply ridiculous. So without Trump, basically the GOP is left with a bunch of unpopular policies. With Trump, they have his lunacy. Now, I don't think that Trump can defeat Biden in 2024. I think he will come up short once again. If the Democrats put up a different candidate, which is possible, I pretty much would stick with that position outside of a real stinker. But I think he would lose to Biden. But I think DeSantis or any other Republican would lose even harder. Because even though they all benefited from the Trump movement, they aren't the real deal. As I said in my, post the other day, why would you reach for a Red Bull if it's on the table when there are lines of pure cocaine available? Hypothetically speaking, of course, but my point is that why go for some kind of half measure when the real, genuine Trumpian insanity is available? The GOP, despite it all, despite his many problems, needs a crazy candidate in order to activate its new base. It just won't be the same with DeSantis, and it certainly won't be the same with a Jeb blank candidate. Well, I guess I was thrown for a real loop here because Donald Trump seemed like a Jeb candidate tonight. I was basically waiting for him to say, literally, please clap. He said something close of saying, please sit down. I feel embarrassed making you stand. A very, very un-Trumpian blank statement. He also said in his kind of apology, let's say, for 2022, he said things like, well, I was telling people, look, let's just win by one vote. That would be okay, right? But they were expecting something bigger. He was saying they were too optimistic and that he was actually very realistic about things. Well, that might not be the worst thing to say at this point if you're a Republican, but it's extremely un-Trumpian. Trump says things like, there's going to be so much winning that you'll get sick of winning, but I'm going to force you to win more. It is insane. That is what activates his base. That is what gives Trump a fighting chance. And, look, we're in a crazy world. particularly after today's developments in Ukraine and Poland. And inflation is definitely on its way down, seemingly, but who knows? He has a fighting chance with that kind of activated lunatic base. And who knows? Things could kind of occur in a certain sequence in which he wins. But that's only possible if he's activating his base. Now, I think he can. He can certainly come back from this. If he were in a different crowd, a different place, at a different time, we might see the old Trump craziness back. But if he thinks that he can act like this and win, I do think he is sorely mistaken. And he reminded me of this kind of like conservative boomer that you'll meet talking about the 1980s or something, because it's all economy, economy, economy. And so it's all, back in 1985, everyone had a mortgage and a two-car garage and a ranch home in the suburbs of Dallas, Texas, something. It's just this kind of everyone was making money kind of thing, which ultimately, although that's attractive to some, ultimately isn't really motivating. Trump was able to get people to feel like their lives were at stake. I mean, again, J6, total disaster, the most buffoonish coup d'etat attempt in world history. However, those people involved in it, even the ones who didn't go into the Capitol, they had the power of religious faith flowing through them. They not only wanted to win, not only were they willing to just throw away all the rules in order to win, they thought that they were going to all die if they lost. That's the power of religious faith and motivation, which was flowing through them. They're not going to have that if he keeps doing speeches like this from Mar-a-Lago among a polite crowd that is gently clapping. It's just not gonna do, to paraphrase Dana Carvey's hilarious impersonation of George H.W. Bush from back in the day. Not gonna do. All right, guys. Anyway, I just wanted to jump on because I wanted to talk about it, but I'm curious to get y'all's reaction on this. So we have two requests, and you can speak if you'd like. So I will go to Alberto. Alberto, how are you?
I'm good, Richard. How are you?
I'm doing well. So sorry to hear about the wizard.
Well,
Although perhaps not ultimately that sorry.
Yeah. I mean, he was a Turk, so wasn't that bad.
Yes.
In the end.
No.
But yeah, it's very low energy tonight. I was actually really surprised just to see that. It was.
I don't know if I've ever seen him like that, actually.
Yeah, I kind of feel like after Kari Lake and Oz and Herschel and just all the losses he's suffered, like he kind of feels like he has to kind of project a more clean image, but that won't work for him. He's Donald Trump,
Yeah. It's not going to
work. That ship has sailed.
Yeah, I don't know if this is also beyond just the place where it took, where he gave the speech. I don't know if it also had something to do with the fact that he has new campaign managers. Forgetting the man's name, there's actually a kind of longtime Republican campaign manager who's involved. Someone remembers his name. He might very well have new people. He might also very well be trying to appeal to the Republican donor class in a way that he feels like he needs them, and it's kind of like, this is, who I am. And also, to be fair, there was a kind of pragmatic populism that I think was always surrounding Trump for decades of, we're getting taken advantage of trade deals. We need to build things in America. The Japanese are on the rise. You can kind of see this in these, interviews with Larry King and so on that are on YouTube, there is a kind of pragmatic nationalism. And I could, to be fair, actually not even to be fair, to be kind of charitable, I could maybe see that in there somewhere. But again, I just don't think that can cut it. At the end of the
Yeah.
day, for a party that is this unpopular in terms of its policies and vibe, you just need to go nuts. You need to inspire religious belief. And if you're just going to run as a traditional Republican, you're going to lose very hard to someone. I mean, I don't think anyone can underestimate Joe Biden at this point. I mean, in terms of whatever his many faults are, he sticks with it. I mean, he lost. What did he lose his first three races when he was trying to get the Democratic nomination and just kind of stuck with it and came out?
First two races.
First two races, okay.
One in the 80s and then one in 08.
Iowa and New Hampshire, yeah. So, I don't think anyone can underestimate him. And he won during COVID. I mean, it's like you're going to lose vis-a-vis that. I mean, Mitt Romney could have given this speech if he had just changed a few words and, taken out the weird Trumpian syntax and made it slicker and more Romney-esque. He could have paraphrased the speech. And I don't think that's going to cut it.
Yeah, despite the syntax, this really was just, there was nothing really Trumpian about it, ultimately.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just, I don't know, he's just trying to make that broad appeal and kind of take the wind out of DeSantis' sails, I guess. But no, there's really nothing exceptional about this. I don't think he can do anything with it.
Trump is
Go ahead,
lost.
Reginald.
Yeah, thanks. Trump is, in my opinion, and the opinion of many other people, I would say he's frankly lost all credibility at this point. I mean, for God's sake, the man nearly lost us the fucking House, in this race. He cost us the Senate. I was talking the other day about, just take three races. The Senate race in Pennsylvania, Major's seat in Michigan, Peter Major, and I believe her name's Herrera Butler. Trump, basically forced those people out of the GOP, and now all those seats are blue. I mean, we have the House now, but what good is that if McCarthy's still in power?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's fine. I mean, I think you're assuming that the GOP can actually do well. They've
done well with DeSantis.
They did well, yeah, but he's an incumbent governor in Florida, and
a traditionally purple state, in a state that he initially won by a fraction of a percentage point.
Well, he gerrymandered the shit out of the state, didn't he?
I don't know how true that is. I mean, that's not uncommon in any given state.
Beyond
even still,
he won. I'm not denying that.
He was racing against a former Republican governor in Charlie Crist.
Yeah, I mean that's fine, but speaking nationally, I mean, again, there are two times that since 1988, there's one Republican that has won a majority of the national vote. It was George W. Bush in 2004. His father won a majority in 1988. Other than that, George W. Bush won in 2000 and won a minority vote. Trump won in 2016, getting less votes than Hillary Clinton. I mean, it's just all losses. And after realignment, I think what is it, 7 out of the last 10 Congresses or something? There's been a kind of red era of Congress. I can go look at the numbers. But that red era of Congress is by razor thin margins. I mean, at some point, like the FDR coalition, they average 60% of the House vote. So, I mean, I'm just telling you, like, all of this stuff is really unpopular. And it's not a winner.
Frankly, I think you have too limited a scope of historical view. There was a period in time following the Civil War when the Republican Party won the presidency and a large number of congressional races for the better part of 50 years, save for Grover Cleveland's term. This is just a trend. Trends change. And I believe that, maybe being anti-crime, being pro-life and against infanticide, being in favor of any number of proposals that I believe we can win on. Maybe they're unpopular in 2022, but in 2024, when DeSantis has beaten Trump in the primary, when America's cities, save for Tallahassee and Orlando, are crime-ridden, when the economy is in shambles, I genuinely believe that DeSantis is going to wipe the fucking floor with Joe Biden.
Okay, well, you sound like Jordan Peterson and a Darth Vader suit.
I think they can put out Trump or DeSantis. It does not matter. They are going to lose. That's my opinion.
Why? Why are you saying?
Because nothing that you're talking about has any popularity.
Especially the abortion.
Popularity doesn't
the
matter,
idea
Richard.
that being pro-life is popular.
Have you not read the Founders? Do you believe in mob?
Okay, Darth Jordan, calm down.
Yes, I have read the Founders. What is your point?
I'm saying, ideas don't have to be popular for us to be in power. And furthermore, I would say, I don't know what your opinion on the steal of 2020 was. Again, I have my gripes with Trump. But, personally, I think, he was right in saying that the Democrats rigged the election. And
all right.
I think...
Okay, goodbye. Just so I genuinely think this, but also I feel compelled to say that the 2020 election was not stolen. All right. That guy drank the Kool-Aid.
Oh boy, yeah.
JJ, do you want to say anything more?
Yeah, I got some. I don't know if I should say it's some off-topic questions. I don't want to spoil the direction you were going.
I mean, how off topic?
Well, I'm not in the know, so I just wanted to know what happened between you and Millennial Woes, and why you guys don't do anything together. It might seem kind of random, but I'm just genuinely curious.
Nothing happened. I mean, I don't know what to say. What is Millennial Woes? Is he still around? I mean, I have not seen anything from Millennial Woes.
He's on Odyssey, but yeah, not on YouTube anymore.
All right. Yeah, I mean, they all kind of, ganged up against me or whatever, but I generally don't care, to be honest.
Okay, I was just wondering because, I thought some of the videos you guys together, that's no slight at Ed Dutton or whoever you're with these days.
Right.
But I thought Millennial Woes was a pretty intelligent guy at times.
He is an intelligent guy. I would certainly be willing to do something with him, but yeah, I mean, there was a real, there's a just kind of cliquish kind of stuff going on, and I guess I'm a clique of one. So yeah, but I don't have any. I mean, nothing happened, and I don't have any ill will or anything. At the same time, I kind of want to move past a lot of that stuff, to be honest. Just the white nationalism, it just just bores me.
I
To be
don't.
frank.
I wouldn't call him a white nationalist.
Well, okay, but
But
it seems
fair
like
enough.
a fairly good description. All
That was
right.
all. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Mike.
Hey, hi, Richard. I stopped calling you Rich.
Oh, good.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was watching or listening to a Nick Fuentes space he had, I think, and you were in it. It was about 4 weeks ago, and you two hadn't talked in years. And what a nice meeting that was. You were both very gracious towards each other, even though you have some opposing ideology. And it was really nice seeing that. He gave his analysis of you afterwards. I thought it was pretty good. He said he had told you for years, or he had told you not for years, but he said, look, you're an intellectual, you're an elitist, and you write well. You should stick to writing and not go on these tours. He said it just wasn't something that you were really built for. I
It was a
thought you
nice
did.
conversation. I thought it was a bit rude what he said afterward, to be honest
Oh,
with you.
oh, really? I didn't. I thought he gave Richard a lot. He called Richard an
Well,
intellectual.
it's
Called him
fine.
smart.
It's fine. Yeah. Look, I uh I was not expecting that. I was looking at Twitter as I was going to bed, and there was a space with a couple hundred people in it, and I was curious. Lo and behold, Nick was there. It was rather surprising. I actually was expecting, this, typical Fuentes, insult barrage, but I served the ball across the court in a respectful manner, and it was returned. So I thought that was good. I will say this about Fuentes. I do think that there's kind of a man behind the mask, so to speak. Maybe it's a kid wearing a Darth Vader helmet, but there's still like someone there. And so I do think he's able to listen or things like that. In terms of, criticism of me, I mean, whatever. I mean, I appreciate being called a good writer and so on. Um, I do think that I'm good in front of a crowd, but that probably can't happen because of the world we live in. But we'll see. But
Well,
I think the main thing is I really don't want to go down the path again because the path doesn't really lead anywhere. I mean, the path that you tread being a kind of Trump fan is the path towards January 6th or something like that. I mean, that's the way that Nick is used. I mean, Nick is very good in front of a crowd. He is very good on his live streams. He has a organic audience, unlike many conservatives. But that if he's playing the game of being at the end of the day a Republican or Trump cheerleader, there will be people who will ultimately use him for their own ends. People who don't have an organic audience, who don't have charisma or whatever you want to call Nick's stuff. And they're going to use him and they're going to put him in situations where he's going to take the fall. Stop the Steal being an excellent example. But, anyway, I do think that Nick kind of there's a man behind the mask or a boy behind the mask. I do think there's a real person there. But I also think that, our ideological differences are pretty great at this point. I will kind of credit him. I saw some clip that was made from Media Matters where he said in a way something that kind of gelled with what I just said. He basically said, abortion's popular, being gay is popular, et cetera, et cetera. So we need a Catholic dictatorship to force our will upon people, or at least make them play ball. He said something to that effect. I actually applaud his honesty in a way There's no more irony. There's an acknowledgement of the situation that he's in.
By the way, he didn't say you were bad in front of a crowd. He thought you were good in front of the crowd, just that you didn't like it. And you're better off right. Yeah. So anyway, okay. And he also said you're a liberal who's a racialist, and that was unique. So about Trump, I'm all for Trump. I love Trump. I'm glad he announced his candidacy, but I don't know where he gets the votes in 2024 with demography marching on. The states he won in 2016, it was marginal. He won a lot of states, but they were all marginal. And the old people who were voting for him then have died off, and the younger people coming up are mostly Democrats. So unless the Democrats are somewhat suppressed in their feeling towards going out to vote, and the Republicans, are overwhelmingly proud about it and go to the ballot. I don't, yeah, enthused. I don't know really where he gets the votes.
Well, I mean, I think he actually is going to get votes in a population that he mentioned, which is Hispanics. I mean, again, I don't think he can win. I agree with you. I think, or at the very least, I think it would be very hard. Now, we live in a crazy world, and we don't quite know what hand he's going to be dealt. He might be, who knows what could happen, particularly with the Russia situation, or there are other things. Who knows? He could win, but I think it is very unlikely, and he needs some help. If it's just a straight up repeat of 2020, if things pretty much stay the same for 2 years, he will lose to Biden, and all of those Democrats will be absolutely enthused. But his base will be enthused. And I think the only way the GOP can win is with someone like him. But to go back to to something I said earlier, the great irony of Trump is that he defined his candidacy in 2016 by calling Mexican immigrants racist, or not racist, rapist, and murderers, and some might be good. But his legacy is going to be a kind of slow but real shift of Hispanics to the GOP. And he's the one who can kind of do it. All of those, many of the counties that he won in 2020 went for Beto. Again, so they kind of went back to the default, more or less. But through, I think, in some ways, the kind of craziness, I do think that he can have broad appeal beyond, just a white base. I mean, again, white people, I always say this, I'm like a broken record. He won a smaller percentage of the white vote than Mitt Romney did. In 2020, he won an even smaller percentage than he did in 2016. So I agree that there's a kind of white nationalist quality to Trumpism. There's no doubt about it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that kind of thing is popular among whites in general. And so I don't disagree with you entirely about a lot of the older people just simply dying and so on. And the Gen Z are clearly like a left-wing bloc, resembles millennials in many ways. But regardless, I do think that if the GOP has a chance in 2024, it's with a crazy candidate, A, and B, Trump's weird outreach to Hispanics and Black men. It's not just a talking point. Like if he goes crazy like he did in 2016, they can legitimately say that they have a kind of multiracial working class coalition.
If he does win, will the cities burn? Will there be a civil war?
I don't know. I mean, the cities, a lot of this stuff is overestimated. I don't know. I mean, I go back and forth on this. I mean, I have always poo-pooed the notion of civil war for a number of reasons. at the same time, you know, after the Mar-a-Lago raid, and you had these average yahoos attacking the FBI, I mean, I could kind of see it. And so, I mean, one of the reasons why I poo-poo Civil War is that, you know, the 1860s Civil War involved elites. So you had billionaire slave-owning planter class people attacking New England elites, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And they were, even though it wasn't technically, I mean, it was a war of secession, of course, but nevertheless, they were kind of in this great battle over how we're going to define the United States. And, you know, again, the elites are more or less on the same side at this point. There's no like populist elite that could plausibly run the country or redefine it. And so I that's a kind of problem with populism in many ways, and why populism continually fails and kind of doesn't leave a legacy. We've had populism many times in the United States, and it's kind of interesting historically, but it doesn't really leave a legacy. Progressives left a legacy. Populists didn't. So it's hard for me to see a civil war, but then, you know, if you look back at like just this era that we've just lived through, I mean, with Pizzagate, you had a Yahoo enter that pizza place with a gun demanding to see the basement. You had another QAnon guy, I think in 2018 even, who like held up a dam or something. Then you fast forward to 2021, you have people invading the Capitol, demanding to hang Mike Pence and do all this stuff. You fast forward to 2022 and someone takes a gun to the FBI and dies trying. I mean, that's escalation. And so, yeah, I mean, the BLM riots got out of hand, but cities didn't exactly burn. I mean, neighborhoods did. But it kind of also burned out. So I don't know. I mean, I'm conflicted on this. I've been saying that a civil war is impossible in a way, but when I see this kind of unrest and just madness, I think that it actually is kind of possible. So I'm kind of torn on that issue.
Okay, one last question. If he does win, I know you're not a fan, but if he does win, what policies of his would you be rooting for?
What are his policies?
Well, how about immigration?
Well, I mean, he didn't do anything on immigration when he was in office and controlled both houses of Congress.
You know, the one thing he did do is the refugee relocation program at its apex under Obama was about 110,000 a year. He brought down that to about 13,000. Is that something you'd look forward to?
Sure, but you know, none of this is really changing the game. Let's be honest here. You know, I mean, are the trajectory, if it's just purely about demographics, none of that is changing the game. That is the demographic transformation, and it's actually going to be a little more varied than like, you know, less than 50% are whites and the other are, you know, multiracial coalition. It's going to be more varied than that. It's actually going to be a little more complicated than that. But that trajectory is in place. And just like canceling some refugee program is not really going to change any of that. And in terms of more importantly than mere demographics, is the general trajectory of the culture, which he does nothing for. I mean, all of these things that conservatives dislike intensified pretty tremendously during the Trump administration. And you can't just kind of rage against it or try to ban it. You have to There has to be a paradigm shifting thing that changes the flow of the river. And I don't see that coming from him or anyone. So, I don't know, 100,000 refugees, it just doesn't matter on some level. Okay. Thank you, Rick. Pat, you can go.
Yeah, so I agree with you that I was gonna say that Trump's over and all that, but I saw a thing by Nate Silver from 538 that the Republicans actually got they won the most popular vote in the House by like a point, and which is pretty remarkable because it's mainly coming out of states, very blue states like California and New York. They're losing votes in like the Midwest and all that. And that's why they suffered this defeat. But so I agree, Trump is done, but I don't think that the things that he stands for has not suffered a defeat. And you're kind of alluding to like this dark horse sort of person to come out of nowhere and kind of sees 2024, and that's really what I see, because the ultimate emotion and reasons and ultimately like angst, underneath that made Trump possible is still present, and it's just that now they're going to, get a new figure had to go forth, and I think that's going to be very interesting. I think it's very possible that Trump could be the John the Baptist of the villain of the 21st century. It's kind of disturbing in a certain sense.
Well, do you think? I just don't see DeSantis. I just cannot see it. I mean, let's just be frank. I don't care if he was involved in the military. That doesn't actually make you a badass. The guy is short. He is fat. He is boring as hell. He generates contempt because he's a
candidate of the past.
Yeah, he's
Trump's shadow.
Right. And he benefited from Trump, but he also carries the baggage of Trump. I mean, I don't think the reaction against DeSantis will be as intense as the reaction is against Trump, granted. But it will be pretty intense. And it's going to be Martha's Vineyard and banning gays or whatever. It's going to be intense. They're not going to see him as look at this pragmatic, down-to-earth leader who saved Florida. That is not going to be the narrative by the media, and that is not going to be the perception. And so it's like all of the Trump baggage, but none of the fun, so to speak. I'm just telling you, among most people, you look at Ron DeSantis and you think, I'm better than you are. He's just lame. He is soporific. He is short. He seems whiny. Whenever he's supposedly beating people at arguments, he seems like a whiny bitch.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that and all that. I think Ron DeSantis's kind of role is kind of like a nail polish remover of Trumpism off the nail of the Republican Party. I think it's kind of I think ultimately what his purpose is kind of kamikaze himself against Trump and his candidacy. So there's some new figure that's not tainted by both opposition to Trump.
Who would be that figure? Because Trump came out of nowhere. Now, they were setting the groundwork. There was talk in 2010. There was talk in 2012. I think in 2012 he went to CPAC. That was the year where he spoke, by the way, at Geo Proud. That is the gay conservative organization. Anyway, there are all these weird twists and turns and all this, but he did come out of nowhere. So who could come out of nowhere in a Trumpian way? Who would come out of nowhere as a right-wing populist?
I can't answer that question, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was some kind of minority. Some kind of based X or whatever. There's another very interesting article also by 538 published some time ago. I can send it if you want me to. And actually said, whites with more prejudiced views. They polled them in 2016, and they had Hillary Clinton and Ben Carson favorability, and they found that prejudiced whites will always find the base Ben Carson more favorable than Hillary Clinton.
Right.
And likewise, it's true. And there's been a lot of discussion and critical race theory about this kind of hypothesis. And ultimately, it's this kind of edginess where they're still kind of racist, but they're like thinking like, oh, I'm gonna own the libtards by supporting a black, and now they think they can't be racist. But
yeah, I totally agree with that premise. But who? I mean, I'm not
Kanye West.
Yeah, you're right. You nailed it. Who said that?
Me.
Yeah, I mean that would be so nuts. Also, someone sent this on DMs, but I think Nick Fuentes, who we mentioned a few minutes ago, had the same opinion of the speech that I did. And he said something to the effect of like, I'm out if this is what it's about. You know, he wanted the red meat, just raw Trump steaks thrown out into the audience. But, you know, if Kanye tried it in 2020, but that was a hastily assembled write-in candidacy, I believe. Was he on the ballot at all? But he now has time to do that. He has his own personal wealth. He would activate the craziness. He would be Trumpian in the sense that the media would just have to cover him. They would cut away from a Trump speech and cover an empty podium of Kanye. Wow. No doubt. I think I think someone just kind of nailed it. Or, Kanye, Kyrie Irving from Hebrews to from Hebrews to presidents or something like that.
I think because of that, it would be hard for him to ever be a Republican because of the whole anti-Semitism stuff.
Well, I know.
Or be just a politician in general, to be honest.
But you could kind of say that about 2016 Trump.
True.
I mean, I don't think you can't underestimate the degree to which Trump was just treated as just anathema by the party. You know, I mean, they hated him. Granted, he would say things like, you know, we love Israel, blah, blah, blah. But he was kind of, in the America First stuff, there were these echoes of the old America First movement. There was a kind of sense of, you know, a kind of vague anti-Semitism and isolationism. Pro-Russia as well really went against the party. So, and now he flipped them. He totally converted. I mean, it coincided with the Trump era, but he converted them to be Russia fanatics. So, I mean, things can change. And, you know, I think the Kanye thing is like just wild enough to work. The other thing I've noticed about like predicting history is that there's always a narrative that gets going, and then you just throw that out the window, basically, because something else is going to happen. You know, it's kind of like it's rare that like in the NFL, like the team that everyone has favorited, like, oh, this is their year, they're going to do it. It kind of never works out that way. There's just something, I don't know, it's just like a law of the universe. And everyone now, if you ask them, if you poll them, it's, oh, Trump's over, it's DeSantis, you know, and Biden is too old to run twice or something like that. None of that's going to be correct. It's going to be something that's unpredictable that actually happens and then seems inevitable in retrospect. You know, I mean, you even see that with people like, as you know, Alberto, you can vouch because I know you were at that when I talked about it. So like 3 months ago, I was basically saying, I think I want to buck the consensus and like make a call for a Democratic victory. And then I questioned my own instincts. So that, that recording is up on Substack, but I kind of questioned my own instincts. And I was like, God damn it. I'm looking at these polls. I just can't like go against math. Well, it's ultimately not math. Ultimately, people go out and vote. And so I kind of should have stuck with my instincts. But anyway, what you see from pundits now is that they're like, well, no one really thought there was going to be a red wave. Like we were all, it's like, no, you were all convinced of it. The New York Times was convinced of a red wave a week before the election. So it's always something else. And so everyone's kind of fixated on this. And it might be something else. It might be something really different. And I think the Kanye suggestion, it's just crazy enough. It's just crazy enough to actually work.
He was in the Oval Office.
Ah.
So experience.
Yeah.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. And the White Lives Matter, I mean, it's kind of like he's taking a meme from the 2016 alt-right, which was a Trump era, artifact, and he's just putting it on steroids. He wore that to the Paris fashion show. I mean, he just yeah.
He did also make a gospel album, which I guess that's something a lot of Christians would like.
He was going to get the religious right vote. And if you imagine them, being fanatic for Trump, and like Paula White doing this like hookah haku, they're coming from South America, hookah haku, they're coming from Africa, hookah hookah. I'm paraphrasing, but that's actually an accurate quote. Think of how nuts they would go over Kanye.
Yeah, I certainly don't imagine them voting. I don't imagine them voting for Kanye over Trump, but if it was like Kanye versus DeSantis, I could imagine Kanye sweeping that thing.
I could kind of imagine. I like this. I think whoever suggested this is.
Yeah,
you did. I think you kind of, because I was asking. I was like, "Who is it? Who's that dark horse?" And lo and behold, it's Kanye. Yeah,
Yay.
Yay. Excuse me. A name on the president. I mean, wow, that just makes too much sense.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, there's this prevailing narrative, like I said before, in CRT, which I tend to follow, that we're kind of like in the age of like the racist non-whites, of like multiracial whiteness, where like you have these like non-whites who are kind of like proxies for like quote unquote white interests, who like kind of like personify the racism and bigotries of the white population, who they can now like support now having like the plausible deniability of not being racist because this person's not white.
Yeah. Yes.
So
that's crazy enough to make sense.
As an aside, I think they'll become funny. I think the conservative movement, and you're kind of seeing this in Britain too with the this new Indian prime minister. These like based X's are trying to be very pragmatic, very like non-ideological, so they tend to wiggle their way up to hierarchy very well. I think eventually in 10 years, like most conservative organizations will be ran by non-whites, essentially grifting the stupid white population. But
yeah, I think that's probably accurate, and I do think that like the GOP is going to fundamentally change the conservative movement. It's going to be affected by this. I mean, I just mentioned that before. In 2012, Romney said, Russia is our greatest strategic adversary or something like that. And actually, Barack Obama was more down to earth and kind of reasonable about that and said, well, we need to get over the Cold War, Grandpa, basically. And you fast forward a decade, and there's more Russian sympathetic sentiment, not just kind of anti-war sentiment or something, Russia sympathetic sentiment in the GOP. So they actually can go off the reservation. They can really transform. And so I think the Kanye stuff, it's that kind of crazy racism that's kind of plausibly deniable. Like it's, I'm not, how can I be racist? I'm black, but also how can I be anti-Semitic? I'm in fact a Jew.
It's just making Kanye his running mate would unironically boost his campaign and give him that juice that he had in 2016.
No question.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Kanye from there,
yes,
becomes
just
president.
For the record, I'm out. Like I am not on board, basically. But just if anyone thinks that's what I'm leading to, but yeah, I just think, wow, this is really an interesting prognostication. They're going to have to tap in to that. I mean, it fits with my general thesis, which is that you need to tap into the id. You need to tap. You need to, like, Clarice Starling has to go visit Hannibal Lecter in order to solve the case. Like, you need to go there. And how are they going to do that? Maybe Trump can't do it on his own anymore.
Yeah, you need to kind of look them in the eyes and kind of see where the wind is blowing.
Yes. All right, let me let some other people speak. Wackaloid of Verified.
Hello, Richard?
Yes, hi.
Hey, I was thinking, what is your, if you don't mind me asking, what is your personal plan to deal with the so-called browning of America? Is it just use wealth to insulate yourself, live in kind of white areas, or is that still even an issue that you concern yourself with?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I'm just really not interested in this kind of stuff anymore.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I've been out of the loop for a while, so I'm not exactly sure where you stand on this stuff.
Okay. All right, thanks.
But also,
Aaron?
Yes. So, kind of to build off his point, I was curious what you learned from the Pat Buchanan interviews that you gave a while back, and maybe the Bowden ones might overlap a little.
Well, I don't think those overlap much. Yeah, I mean, what did I learn from them? I probably learned more by reading Pat's book than speaking with them. I mean, he's a very gracious guy and a very intelligent guy. I think Pat was almost, to go back to even some of these comments that Fuentes made or something, I almost think Pat is too much of an intellectual to be a populist. Like, Pat is a very intelligent man. Pat does, I think he came in with the Nixon administration in his 20s. I mean, he kind of leans in that direction. And I don't think Pat ever tapped into the crazy. Pat would make really reasonable arguments about trade and immigration and culture. And he would get a bit edgy. But, the 1992 RNC convention speech, will take, they took back Los Angeles block by block, and that's how we'll take back America. I mean, okay, it's passionate, it's a bit edgy, but it doesn't tap into the total lunacy that Trump was able to tap into with the alt-right, with QAnon, with Stop the Steal, with all of it. He just never was able to do that. So I don't know. I mean, that's kind of my takeaway. But I think Pat is probably most interesting writing about history and kind of making it come alive, or even writing about his own career. Okay. Lloyd George knew my father. Wow. You are up.
To sort of go off what you said about Pat Buchanan, I think the big difference between Buchanan and like why Trump succeeded where he didn't was that Trump was able to appeal to the sort of socially moderate voters who might have agreed with Buchanan on immigration and trade, but not so much on the culture war stuff. But obviously, with abortion being more of an issue now, and Trump leaning more into the crazy populist, right? I think that's sort of radical centrism, or what some people call middle American radicalism. That's base of support for Trump is somewhat diminished, and I think that's sort of the main tension in what you might call the
2016. I mean, yeah, I do think that there was in the RNC and going into the election, there was a kind of Sam Francis quality to Donald Trump. I mean, in his book, The America We Deserve, I believe is the title of it. I mean, he came out in favor of national health care. There was an interesting moment where I think Ivanka mentioned extending family leave for women and so on. I mean, there was some very interesting kind of pragmatic talk. You know, at the RNC, I don't think he mentioned abortion, although maybe he did, but it was in passing and it wasn't really salient. At least what I saw, I watched 30 to 45 minutes of the Trump speech. I don't think he mentioned abortion at all. And yet that's his ultimate legacy. I mean, the thing about Trumpism that is lasting is the end of Roe v. Wade. Nothing else is. So if he's now running as like a sleepy version of what he was doing in 2016, I mean, again, I don't really think that can win. You know, as I've been saying, I think he needs to dial up the crazy. But yeah, I mean, I think you make an interesting point, but I do think that like the reasonable middle American radical is kind of a dying breed. Whites in the suburbs and whites who live in urban areas are going to the Democratic Party. It's a slow but sure transition. The multiracial working class coalition that Trump wants to create and that did create, they want you dial the crazy up to 11, man. That's what they want. That's how you motivate them. That's how you win.
If I may interject.
Sure, go ahead. Gay partisan.
Yeah. Just want to say, first of all, like, hi, Richard. And
Hi.
Seriously, like, the whole talk about immigration, it's just upsets me because I came to the United States as a refugee from Saudi Arabia. And I had to represent myself. And so, to anyone who out there who thinks that America has open borders, yeah, you're wrong. And as for the former guy, yeah, it's like, I don't know what people see in it. Like,
okay.
I'm gonna mute myself, but
yeah,
go ahead, please.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your comment. Bardamu.
Yes, I found this discussion about Ron DeSantis to be quite fascinating because there is like one big part which people always forget. That is when you see all these Republicans saying like, oh, DeSantis is like a real Republican unlike Trump and blah, blah, blah. I always think to myself, well, I mean, Trump has like a huge personality cult, and as long as he is alive and as long as he's active in politics, it's more or less impossible to run against him in a Republican primary. So it's, I mean, it's in like not only as president, but if he would like take planning to run as a senator somewhere, it's more or less impossible to run against him for that reason. And I don't see enough of these people really taking that into account. I mean, I saw like some. You're familiar with like the Lincoln Project, right? There's a bunch of these. Yes, it's basically, for people who don't know, it's Republicans who hate Trump. They had like an interesting like ad about DeSantis, and it sort of hints on this, but in an interesting manner, because they say like, "Oh, DeSantis, he's like Trump. You made DeSantis," and it was almost like implies that he was like a junior partner to Trump, and that he was going to take on Trump's mantle now when Trump is too old or something. And it was very bizarre to see because it's almost like, I mean, because it more or less forces the point I made earlier about how it's not really possible. You have to be a Trumpist if you're going to run today. It's not really possible to do anything else.
Yes. I mean, yeah, I basically agree with that. Okay, Tony, you have your hand. Tony, very online, you have your hand up. You have
Yeah,
the floor.
yeah. I just have a very brief question that's not necessarily related, but I'm curious what you have to say about an individual known only as Jason Reza Georgiani. Do you have thoughts about, his work, his thought?
I don't have many thoughts on Jason. I don't. I don't quite know what he's up to now. He did strike me as a very highly intelligent guy when I knew him back in the day, but I haven't really thought of him recently. But I don't quite know what he's doing. I think he's promoting Prometheism or something like that. I don't fully understand what's going on. Perhaps you could relay that to me. But okay. Let's see here. Dragon of Reno.
Yo.
Hey.
Yo, what's up?
What's up?
I haven't really followed you too much, but I just had a couple questions for you. Is it true that you voted for Joe Biden? And then sub question, do you think Joe Biden is a pedophile?
I'm gonna remove you from speakers. Yes, I did vote for Joe Biden. I am very happy with that vote. And no to your second question. Okay. Brock fan.
Hey.
Hey.
Well, I was just wondering what you think about the midterms and really just the fact that Republicans didn't win. I mean, this, to me, I'll admit I didn't really follow it super hard and I didn't vote, but that, this seemed like an election that Republicans were primed to win, and they didn't. And what do you think the future of the party is now after this?
Yeah, I wrote stuff on this. Basically, yes, it was absolutely Republicans' race to win. The midterm flip effect, however you want to analyze that, just seems overwhelming. And the fact that they didn't pull it off, they didn't pull off sweep, and they didn't get a major majority in the House is certainly disappointing for them. One thing I would say is, and this is something that I've been talking about. In FDR's coalition from 1933 to 1995, you had Democratic dominance in the House. We've lived through a kind of red era of politics, and the Republicans have controlled the House of Representatives the majority of the times, and they control it by razor-thin margins. So this kind of has been their day, and in a way, having whatever the number is going to be, 220 or something like that, that's actually pretty normal for the past 30 years of politics. They just don't have the legitimacy or mandate to dominate in the way that the Democratic Party did previously. So it's not terribly surprising. And it is interesting that these Trump candidates just lost. So all of these lieutenant governors and all these kind of election denier candidates, that was clearly just a losing proposition. But wasn't that kind of looking back to 2020? I don't think there's going to be another J6. I think what's going to happen is going to be very different because no one predicted J6. And it was something new, but something that kind of made sense at the time. and in the minds of those people doing it. And I think there's going to be something else that's going to happen that will be very surprising and that no one predicted.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, one more thing. What do you think about Tulsi Gabbard as like a dark horse candidate that you were talking about earlier?
Yeah,
or maybe a VP pick.
Yeah, I think maybe. I mean,
because she filled in for
I
Tucker
wonder
Carlson.
if she has a real constituency though, because the thing is, she was an interesting candidate, and I think a lot of people, including myself, kind of liked her as this progressive Democrat who's kind of bucks the system here and there. She really lost a ton of credibility just kind of going around, you know, endorsing Carrie Lake or whatever. She just seemed like a typical Republican. She sounds like a Republican.
Yeah.
I don't think she has the real constituency. I mean, like, say what you will about Kanye West, he still maintains a fan base. And those people who, you know, his sponsors left him, but the fans, I don't imagine have left him at all. And so he has something. I don't know. She just strikes me as kind of a weird grifter, and you have to ask, like, who are you? Because it's like she what did she give up her post in the DNC due to like Hillary's treatment of Bernie Sanders or something, which is like, okay, that's ballsy. But then she goes around and just basically sounds like a Republican, you know, talking about limited government and God-given rights and whatever. It's just like, it's just strange. I don't think that's really plausible.
Yeah, I don't really see it, but
she's definitely aiming to be vice president. I mean, if there's a logic, just a career logic to what she's doing, it's definitely to be Trump's VP.
Yeah, maybe she'll be in the primaries, but
that would be interesting. Okay. Before I go to Pat again, Oblivious, how are you doing, my man? From down
under. Good day, Richard. How you doing, matey?
I'm doing well. Good day, mate.
What
good. Time is it?
Yeah.
What time is it down under right now?
It's 4:45 in the afternoon at the moment. So I'm just doing a little bit of a walk through the park.
But in Australia, the clocks move backwards, right? So it's actually morning?
Exactly. And the toilets, it rotates the other way as well. The Simpsons told me that. So
that is just ungodly.
Yeah.
Toilets flush wrong.
Yeah. I think it ends up in China somewhere, but I'm not entirely sure.
And you guys do foreplay after sex, is what I've heard.
Foreplay? What the hell's that?
It's a complicated term. I don't think we have the time to explain it to you.
No. Yeah. You've got it all wrong. If you're concerned about the woman, you're completely finished in the first place. No, it's good, Richard. No, I haven't talked to you for a while, so it's good to finally get on with you. But it was an interesting point that you made about Kanye and the non-white thought leaders that will be leading the whites into the future in America. I just wanted to add my little 2 cents into the point. Doesn't it strike you as weird that Joe Biden is actually the president, and considering he is Irish, he would be non-white as well?
Okay. Yes. Now, look, I find these things funny, but we don't want to get banned for known as an anti-Irish podcast. But
okay, fair enough. I just want to throw my 2 cents in. I don't.
He's half Irish, but he kind of identifies as Irish. I believe he's half Irish.
It's one drop rule, right? Speaking of Twitter,
well, if there is a one drop rule, then I'm Irish as well. But
my family is Liverpool, so maybe I've got some long Irish roots. I'd hate to I hate to have to lynch myself, but just in regards to Twitter, have you noticed much in the way of your followers? And I see that there's a lot of people in the room tonight, but you usually get these same amounts of people on any other chat that you have. Is that right?
I mean, well, look, my follower count has basically stayed more or less the same for 4 years. And it was growing, exponentially, or at least linearly. It was really growing month by month. And I don't want to sit here whining or whatever, but I do kind of suspect that there was a kind of shadow ban effect or something like that. And I don't know if that's going to be lifted or if the system's going to stay. I don't really care that much. I mean, I don't need 1 million followers or whatever. I'm just trying to reach people who have ears to hear. And it does seem like my spaces, they usually do pretty well. I mean, I gave you guys 5 minutes warning, and, people jump on, a few thousand people listen to it. That's cool. These are pretty laid back. But I have noticed some kind of just weird things with Twitter, I have to say. Recently, like translation wasn't working. I don't know. I don't know if we want to open up the can of worms of Twitter talk, but I do think that Elon is kind of shooting from the hip and stuff like this. I don't even know what to say.
He could potentially get liquidated if the Tesla and Twitter stocks keep on going down the way they have been the last 6 months.
That's what I've suggested as well. I mean, we've talked a little bit about this in my private group. I mean, so Twitter. I mean, it depends on how this loan is created. Surely Elon signed off on the loan on some level, like he put his name on it. So it's multi-billion-dollar loan. I mean, other people did put in money, but it still is a multi-billion-dollar loan. And that is basically Twitter's problem and Elon's at some level. But I imagine that he collateralized that to a degree with Tesla stock. But if he needs to sell Tesla stock on a recurring basis, then that can cascade to a point where he is, value is collapsing and he's selling more and more as the value goes down to pay off the loan, which is, who knows what it is. I've heard $1 billion a year. All of these are estimates. We don't know. It's a private company now. But yeah, I mean, I could imagine really bad things happening. I mean, keep this in mind as well. Tesla is worth, or it was at one point, worth more than, Mercedes, GM, et cetera, combined. That just strikes me as an absurd valuation. And it's basically a kind of dot-com bubble era thing where people are like, well, he's the first mover. He has name brand recognition on electric cars. So he's going to take advantage of this new wave that's coming in. You got to get in early. I don't buy that at all. I think I could imagine an Apple car coming out. This has been long rumored. I can imagine all these other companies are doing battery powered cars well. So I just don't buy the whole thing. And then with a lot of these other companies, they, as I've said, they strike me as kind of vaporware. Neuralink, Tesla robots, and on down. It does not strike me as plausible at all. And I just don't know what to say about this whole thing. I more or less agree with the notion that like Twitter is the world consciousness or the public square. I basically agree with that. And if that is what he's going to maintain, that's great. But yeah, this has been a few crazy weeks.
I saw a take on the Australian broadcaster about the Twitter acquisition that he was trying to move to what's the Chinese Twitter? Is it WeChat or something like that? I can't remember what the Chinese.
He mentioned this himself in an interview where basically it's an everything app. So you can send payments kind of like PayPal or Apple Pay or Cash App or whatever, you can do all sorts of things on one app. Now, keep in mind, Twitter is a lot smaller than we know. I mean, Twitter is in a way the most important social media app in the sense that, you know, when a head of state wants to issue a press release, it will most often, if not always, be an embedded tweet that you'll read. It's just a kind of public way of speaking. That being said, its numbers are dwarfed by, you know, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, all that kind of nonsense. But those just don't seem to have the kind of public presence. I mean, I do think Twitter is kind of more important in that sense.
Yeah. Do you think rising interest rates will affect his ability to service the loan, or if stock prices keep on going down?
Well, if he has a variable rate loan, yeah, I mean, it definitely could.
Yeah.
Rising inflation, you're not going to buy a Tesla. You know, I mean, there are lots of things. Although rising gas prices means you might buy a Tesla. I mean, you can kind of spin it in different ways.
Yeah.
I think inflation's going to slow down, actually. I think we're generally headed in towards a massive deflationary cycle.
Well, as you know, the libertarians have been jumping up about inflation for 20 years. Well, you were involved in the libertarian movement yourself.
Yes,
and it never came.
They're always wrong. So
yeah,
exactly. Wrong again.
Yeah, exactly right. They're always wrong until they're right, I guess. 30 years later, but it seems to me like inflation is a bit like Russia invading Ukraine. Even in the 70s, with was it who invaded Israel then? And there was a arms embargo or something against the Saudis and the Saudis
or something. Yeah.
Yeah, the early 70s one. Yeah, it's a state. Yeah, it's a state induced thing. It's not just creating money; it's a shortage of the underlying commodity, and usually that's state actors. So it's inflation just doesn't come out of the air. Let's put it that way. It's the libertarian notions of print money and inflation shows up in your local supermarket is I think it's been proven to be incorrect given the last 15 years. But if your economy relies on a commodity and that commodity is not within your control, like if it's in Saudi Arabia or Russia or something like that, and the Russians don't want you to have it, well, you're going to have inflation. So but sorry, I've been talking for a long time. So
okay,
nice talking to you again, Richard.
Up with you, obvious. Put a shrimp
God bless.
on Barbie for me. Thank you.
I absolutely hate shrimps. I hate them. I hate prawns. Catch you later.
Vasilisa, the Wolf of San Francisco.
Hey, Richard. It's been interesting seeing your kind of political transformation over the past
your
couple
voice
of.
Does not match your avatar.
Yeah. Well, I got my account banned, and I thought I'd get more followers back if I switched it up a little bit.
Well, that's the only reason I called on you. I was like,
yeah. Well, I guess it worked. You see, Richard, quick question for you. So, I've seen your transformation over the past couple of years, and I haven't quite been able to figure out kind of exactly what your ideal vision, I guess, for the country is, and kind of explaining your support for Joe Biden. Is it that you actually kind of support those policies, or are you kind of an advocate for accelerationism? I just kind of wanted to get a little more clarity of like what your ideal presidential candidate or government looks like, or that's without kind of taking into account realism, I guess, of what's happening or where everything is going.
Well,
what would be kind of your ideal vision?
Yeah, I get your question. Look, things are accelerating whether I like it or not, and whether I vote for Joe Biden or Donald Trump or whatever. I mean, we're headed down a peculiar path, and that has no. You could make arguments that Trump accelerates things. You can make arguments that Biden accelerates things, etc. I think it kind of speaks to a certain, like, maybe on your part, residual conservatism that you think the Democrats are more accelerationist or something. Like you actually buy the notion that they're the radical left. I don't. I think on the whole, Democrats are just simply a better group of people to vote for, to be honest, just on the issues. And, I don't even know quite what the Republicans stand for. They complain a lot. They didn't have a platform outside of personal support of Donald Trump in 2020. Low taxes, whatever. I mean, I just don't even quite know what they stand for. So, I mean, I think Joe Biden has been a good president, and far from perfect, but he's actually pretty good. And I think he's underestimated as a politician to pull off victory after victory. And that's generally how I feel. But overall, I'm just concerned with bigger issues at this point. I just think we have bigger fish to fry, and putting our chips on the table where, this crazy political candidate is going to change the world for us hasn't really worked out.
Sure. No, thanks for that, Richard. But also, kind of to follow up on that, what would be your idea? I mean, so are you saying kind of like the Democrats are the ideal party of the future, or that's kind of who you're following? Okay, then what kind of things are you looking for, I guess, in an ideal world?
Well, I mean, we're an ideal world. I mean, it's difficult to answer that. I mean, you can, I think you can listen to things that I talk about, particularly with Mark Brauman, and piece together what I ultimately want to see. But that's going to take a lot of work. Okay, I'm going to move on to Pat.
Yeah, so Richard, so you're saying that something's unprecedented going to happen now. And, I kind of hear that from the libs, too. I heard this one lib say that we're going to have, like, the MAGA troubles, where, like, these, MAGAs are going to, like, make these, like, random bombings and shootings against the establishment, but never really, like, just be a giant headache that can never really be fixed and all that. I've also heard that, there's going to be a civil war, which is kind of on the fringes. I've also heard that, it's just going to fold up and just kind of, like, dissipate, which I think all those options are kind of unlikely, partially because I don't think Americans have consistently proven themselves, the white Americans specifically, that they will not take individual sacrifices for the collective good. But what I ultimately foresee is just really this kind of like almost like a like a breakdown in the quorum, already kind of seeing, but just I don't think government can function. I think they're just kind of again the government, even as a minority, they'll just kind of fuck everything up so far that eventually they're just gonna coy the libs, keep on encouraging the libs, basically just crush them. That's all they're going to do. And eventually, they're going to have the libs just going to come down and just destroy them. That's really ultimately how I can see this. The only way this can end.
Yeah, I think you make a lot of good points. I mean, if you don't offer any solution, and you are at best endlessly complaining, and at worst making government impossible, or trying to overthrow the government in this buffoonish manner, you are almost asking to be oppressed. I mean, I do understand that. Now, whether the libs really have it in them to do that, remains to be seen. But I would say this in terms of like where we're going. I mean, I think it's reasonable to suggest that where are we going? Well, where are we? Extend that forward, and that what you described kind of is where we are right now. This is the J6 Commission. They're not exactly going to oppress MAGA, but they are going to call them out. And what did Biden say? To semi-fascist, pretty accurate statement. MAGA insanity, etc. But I don't know. I kind of see things changing. I had a discussion today that I'm going to post pretty soon with David Skrbina, and I was suggesting something that's been kind of bubbling in my head for a while, or brewing. I think we are entering a kind of new age of anxiety, and the old belief systems are failing. That kind of mainline Protestant Christianity that was in effect the state religion for the 20th century, that is fading. And Americanism, or the American dream, in the sense of come here and live a middle-class lifestyle, etc., though it is better here than it is in many places in the world, that too is fading. I mean, in 2016, when Trump was elected, that was actually the first time that life expectancy began falling. So I think we're headed, and obviously just like cultural decay and so on. I mean, it's right in your face. So I think we're headed in a kind of like end of the Roman Empire like period. And I think what was notable about that was the rise of a lot of new religions, and Christianity being the most lasting and prominent. So I think we're going to see kind of the rise of some pretty wacky faiths going forward.
As a follow-up question on that, well, I would describe it. I wouldn't really describe it as the end of the Roman Empire. I've also heard like this new like set of religions that come out. I heard people describe, the great outbreak of ideology in the early 20th century. Of communism, fascism, National Socialism, all that other stuff. As that's kind of the new kind of like age of religion. These are new religions, and I don't really think that's the case because just purely because they seem more like doctrines set for like certain like places and ages, but. Regardless, what I really see now is just America collapsing to like before like the I guess like Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, and his Great White Fleet really making America into a global empire. America probably is better described as a Latin American country than as a European country. I think we're kind of seeing a reversion to that, where like the Latin Americanization of the United States, in the same way like.
Are you saying that because of the plantation system, or?
I'm saying that because of the massive wealth and disparity, the inability to reform government. Like Europeans reform government very well. The strict adherence to capitalism, and you see the kind of people capitalism produces, like Donald Trump and Elon Musk. That's not really a desirable system, and just the insistence on we need to have this. It's really more like kind of things you would see in like a right-wing Latin American government. Like it's like more like Pinocho's Chile than it is like social democratic Sweden or Germany, and like conservative.
I can see that.
Yeah, that's really what I'm kind of seeing here, and I would ultimately describe the libs, and this is something I've been thinking about a while. I'm trying to actually write an article on it. I see the libs like the progressive people. They're ultimately like the strain of European. Like Sitzenleben, which is like a German phrase. I'm sure it's familiar. It's like a setting in life. It's also used in like a biblical criticism. It's like kind of like, just really your surroundings, but also like how that kind of affects you, and like kind of like almost like surrounded in it. It almost is you. Libs have a European Sitzenleben. They're like, why can't we be Denmark? That's what they constantly think, because they think they are in Denmark. Whereas like the rural retard chuds. They think they're in Chile. They think they're in Brazil. They think that they're ultimately like this third world, really just to have like the psychology and mindset of really different people. Jay Sakai, who was a famous leftist, you probably heard of them, leftist writer who wrote Settlers. He was first to make this observation. He did it in a different way. He said the German left. The working class in German left, they were on with Ernst Thälmann or in the Social Democratic Party, they were against Hitler. Hitler mainly got his strength from the lower middle class. But in America, racism gets its strength from really the working class. And they're like, well, he made this big theory about how the working class got this petite bourgeois mentality, but I think it's really a colonial mentality, and I think that kind of colonial mentality got defeated by the internationalism and, by FDR, Roosevelt's, Wilson, those sort of people. And I think, this isolationism, really Republicans, everything Republicans represent for really ever represented like corruption, represented like the colonial mindset that's more like Brazil or Argentina.
This is very interesting. I've never thought of things in that way. I think you're definitely on to something if we want to find something good and genuinely progressive about the liberals is that they actually do want to live in Sweden. Yes. And you can see that in public policy, but you can even see that in aesthetics and so on. So I think that is very true. And as I've been mentioning before, I want to stress this, but it's like all of these guys who genuinely, want immigration reform and so on, they think this is going to come via Trump or the GOP or what have you. Excuse me, I have the hiccups cropping up here. The last time, really the only time we had immigration restriction was in the progressive era. And it should be considered excuse me. Wow. Live TV, guys. You never know when hiccups will crop up. But the last and really only time we had immigration restriction was in the progressive era. And it probably should be considered a progressive policy. Otis Graham actually suggested this in his book, Unguarded Gates. I took it as kind of a rhetorical flourish, but he was definitely correct. I should stop speaking. These hiccups are really embarrassing. Someone's going to clip this.
But another interesting fact that people often don't talk about is the 1965 Immigration Act. That actually was the first act that actually put quotas on Latin American immigration. If we did not have that act, Tucker Carlson would talk about, oh, it's so horrible, it's so horrible. Well, no, if we didn't have the act, we actually have way more Latin American immigrants than if we had not. Because before there was no quotas on immigration in the Western Hemisphere. All it did was open up, the far
in
reaches
24, the act was basically putting quotas on Eastern and Southern Europeans. You're correct. Mexico was not addressed in the 24 Act.
Yeah, so I actually think this 1965 Act was like this great. I might say something, but the 1965 Act I actually support it. If I was there, I would have voted for it because as a congressman, because that was the first one to actually address the new immigration problems. It wasn't like this some grave like that's what made America non-white. No, before the 1965 Immigration Act, I actually looked this up. If you paid a $10 fee at the American border as a Mexican resident, you can move in there and you can get citizenship within 2 years. And that was way easier than we have now. There's no quotas, no, waiting or anything like that. So, and who did that but, Under the Rage of Society by Lyndon B. Johnson. That was this great. That's really who, honestly, if we didn't have that, it would probably be like 35% white, honestly. So,
that's LBJ an interesting suggestion. I mean, I find that, I don't think you're lying, but I do find that a little bit difficult to believe. From 1924 to 1965, I mean, immigration actually flatlined and went negative at one point. I didn't know it was so. You had to pay a fee. Were you a resident?
No, if you were a Mexican, right? You went up to the southern border in between 1924 and 1965. You could pay like a $10 fee, and if you enter the United States, due to the treaty of the treaty after the American-Mexican War, it was declared that Mexicans would be seen as white, so they were legally considered white. So if you and all it took before then was if you're a white resident for 2 years, you can get citizenship. So all it took for Mexicans was 2 years.
Interesting.
You pay a $10 fee.
I'll have to look into this. I actually am into kind of revision of this time. I think there is a lot to admire about the act. I think the 24 Act is misunderstood by its own supporters. That is one thing that I stressed in my essay on Madison Grant, which I think should probably be rewritten and expanded. But it was a Nordicist act. I mean, it was trying to reverse the clock, interestingly, and it held for 40 years. But the tradition before that was effectively, if you're white, you get in. Naturalization Act was that. The Naturalization Act wasn't even an immigration act. It was a Naturalization Act, as it says. So that's fascinating. Yeah, I can talk with you outside of this call and kind of get at some of this nitty gritty. The other thing about it was that the family reunification program, again, the story that like Tucker Carlson or VDare tells or whatever, it's like it was this diabolical trick to bring in Latin American Democrat voters or something. That really is not true. I mean, that is like it's like Tucker propaganda kind of stuff. Immediately after the 65 Act, because it was a family reunification paradigm, and the country was 90% European, I mean, it was benefiting Europeans. It was really once you got into like the 1980s that the whole kind of like, trajectory of the act really shifted. And that was due to kind of different factors. It's due to population explosion and a slow reduction of the population and kind of stability in Europe. And the other aspect of this is that, I mean, populations are in tremendous decline. I mean, Mexico is undergoing a population implosion. So all of those people like who were crossing in the year 2000, where we had huge amounts of crossings, those people were born in the 70s or the 80s, and far fewer of them have been born over the past 20 years. And Mexico is going through its own demographic crisis. So, I mean, I think it's good to talk about this stuff. I think there are a lot of nitty gritty, and again, like the right or something like that, they think that you can just kind of like, turn off the 65 Act and everything's going to be hunky-dory. And that is absolutely incorrect.
I would like to hear more about the role of Catholicism in the 1965 Act, because it sounds to me that 1965 represented a pivotal point in which Catholics went from a left-wing to right-wing demographic largely. Specifically urban European Catholic
how are Catholics left-wing now?
No, that's what I'm saying. I mean, at the time in 1965, that was the last point at which primarily Irish and Italian urban Catholics were a primarily left-wing demographic.
You mean they were left-wing before Vatican II?
I would have to look into these. I mean, I would be curious how Catholics. Gosh, I apologize for the hiccups. Let me go get a drink of water. It's so
get some water,
embarrassing.
girl.
Yeah, someone should just scare me. Is what you should do. Just scare me. Tell me that Trump is going to win the 2024 election.
Trump's definitely going to win
Pariah,
2024.
to answer your question,
Oh my God.
no, I don't think it has anything to do with Vatican II specifically. I think it has to do with the role of the civil rights movement affecting urban politics.
Yeah, I think
to me the Catholic sorry.
Go ahead.
To me, at least, the Catholic shift to the right has, as he said, a lot to do with the Civil Rights Act / the increase in the crime rate during the 60s and early 70s. And then I think you also can't discount like suburbanization and sort of the cultural, I guess, like Americanization, but also sort of the Southernization of like American working class culture, because like nowadays, like even in the North, like people listen to country music and like fly the Confederate flag if you're like working class or culturally working class.
I have definitely seen that. Yes, I even hear a kind of quasi Southern accent among working class people in Montana. I know that sounds crazy, but it is. And I did say quasi, but that's almost what I'm hearing. Yeah, I would have to look at that. I mean, is the Catholic vote a lot of Reagan Democrats, so-called, that is people, former Democrats who voted for Reagan? That would be an interesting question. I think I would imagine that the Catholic vote was still majority liberal in the 90s. I would have to look into that. The John Kerry election, interesting. But I don't know. I mean, even now, the Catholic vote is a more liberal constituency than, say, the evangelical Protestants or Mormons.
Well, yeah, certainly today, and especially among white Catholics. Well, I mean, actually, I erased what I just said, but like, if you look at the abortion issue, for example, the abortion issue, and someone call me out if this is a myth, but as far as I understand, when Roe v. Wade actually happened, abortion was not a strictly left-wing, right-wing issue.
Well, no. I mean, that basically it was a non-issue. I mean, George Herbert Walker Bush and Prescott Bush was involved with Planned Parenthood. George Herbert Walker Bush was pro-contraception, family planning, and ultimately abortion. It was basically, the Southern Baptist Convention endorsed Roe v. Wade. So did Billy Graham, I believe. So it did not become the issue it was. Now, there were a lot of evangelicals who were doing the early push against abortion. With that, what is it, that movie that was, it was like a movie series. What was that called again? I'm forgetting right now. You can find it on YouTube, actually. I've seen parts of it. It's very weird. But it coalesced really in the 80s. There was some, I listened to on audiobook an interesting kind of like recent history of the US called Fault Lines, which is pretty good. But basically there were a few races that were kind of test cases for abortion as a litmus test. And that surprised many Republicans. I think what happened, I would have to go look at it. I think what happened is that pro-life Republicans defeated pro-choice Republicans in primaries. But by the 1980s, these things had coalesced. I mean, Reagan was pro-choice, he became pro-life. Herbert Walker Bush really did a turnaround and became pro-life to secure the nomination. And so certainly by the mid-80s, things had coalesced. And at this point, it's difficult to name a pro-choice Republican or a pro-life Democrat. I mean, there are a couple, Susan Collins or whatever, but they're not terribly significant. And things really they coalesced and they kind of polarized. But I don't know, the Catholic vote, I mean, I would have to look at the numbers, but whether the 65 Act caused it, a little bit skeptical in that one. I certainly think the whole kind of like racial era of the 1960s certainly caused quite a bit of that.
I wouldn't say that the 65 Act caused it. I'm just pointing out that I think the 65 Act, to your point, was not necessarily seen as some sort of revolutionary anti-white act at the time because of the role that it was seen in increasing the rate of Catholic immigration.
I see. That's what you're saying. Okay. Interesting. The Catholics are behind it. Well,
not that the Catholics are like acting in a Kabbalistic sort of way, but that Catholics are generally less inclined toward the racial aspects of conservatism, unless it's done in a more subconscious way,
Right.
And this is a main driver of why you see Catholics voting rightward more and more as time goes on.
Okay, interesting. All right, Pariah the doll, eunuch for the kingdom of God. Wow.
What's up, Richard? How are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm so good now that we know for sure Trump is running. All my sources said he was going to announce, whenever, like last week, November 8th, and then he just announced that he was going to make an announcement. So I've been living in anxiety and torment ever since. But
so you're a huge Trump fan or hater?
I love Trump.
Okay. Is he going to bring about the kingdom of God? No, I don't.
No,
I mean,
I
I
don't.
find him fascinating still, and I'm in a way glad that he's in the race because it just simply makes it more interesting. Could you imagine him tweeting from, say, a prison cell?
Like the world would be so boring without him. He makes everything better. He's a star, which is rare in politics right now. I think you would agree.
Yes.
Is he going to bring about the kingdom of God? No, he's not Catholic. He doesn't pretend to be. I don't think the president necessarily has to be Catholic. I think the field's pretty dry, so I'll take Trump since there's no perfect candidate.
Okay.
I don't know why everyone's always waiting around as if there's a perfect candidate like in the wings that's just like being overshadowed by Trump or anyone else, and it's not the case at all.
Okay. I mean, did you live through the past 4 years? You still want that again?
The past 4 years of Biden?
Not the past 4 years. The past 2 years of Biden. His 4 years of a presidency. You want that again?
Do you think that Trump running means 4 more years of Biden?
No, I mean Trump. I mean, when Trump was in power, you want to go back there.
I mean, define going back. I don't think. I mean, I think it's going to be a different. The world's very different.
The world's different. It might very well be different. Fair enough, but it's going to be. I mean, we've seen it. You know, it's one thing in 2016. I remember that kind of hope and potentiality and what is it going to be like and so on. There was something kind of intoxicating about that. But after seeing it just, I don't know. I don't, help me understand why you're hopeful. What do you want to see?
I just don't see a reason not to be hopeful. I think the reason that people were not super happy with the Trump presidency is because he didn't really get anything done. But he didn't. He's not a brilliant political mastermind. He's a brilliant man of the theater. So that's what I'm excited for. It's not that he's gonna change that much. I liked that he was, against regulation, at least in principle, against I don't know. I think it's gonna be so fierce this time. I'm excited for the campaign.
Well, it will definitely be exciting. I am kind of excited for the campaign as well. Okay. Let's do this, guys. Well, we actually have a bunch more people coming in. Interesting. Maybe it's because people are waking up in Europe. I don't know. Nils Gates.
Hi, am I coming through? I just had some problems. Okay, cool.
So Nils, what was Tom Brady's reception in Germany?
I don't think he's that present over here, mainly just because of his extracurricular activities in the crypto community right now on Twitter. But I don't think that he has such a large community over here.
He played a football game in Munich last Sunday. Perhaps you missed it.
Okay, because I'm not really following. I'm not really following any sports, especially football accounts. Probably I missed it, but I don't really think that he has such a large community over here.
Okay.
I guess if he ever had, it was probably because you endorsed him as the official athlete of the alt-right or something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Personally, coming from the topic of Catholic votes that you just had. I wanted to ask where you see the so-called ethnic vote, because that's something that European identitarians always turn into a large issue, because over here, usually immigrants will vote liberal. In Germany, probably for the Green Party right now, because it has the most open borders immigration stance. But sure, always have some token conservatives that would would turn out as poster childs for the Christian Democrats or something like that. But in the US, it's quite different, and I wondered what your opinion on the ethnic voting topic was concerning the midterms.
What do you the ethnic vote? You're referring to like ethnic whites? Or
no, ethnics
like
in general,
Hispanics
because in 2020 we saw that Trump was unexpectedly popular amongst Hispanics, for example.
Yeah.
And I don't really know whether
it
the midterm results have already been ethnically stratified, but I was curious whether this trend had come to an end by now, or whether this could
I think the trend is weirdly dependent upon Trump. So, and again, I've seen some exit polls, but I think maybe in the next coming weeks, people will really crunch the numbers on these. But for instance, Beto O'Rourke, who is really not a very good candidate, and there was a lot of excitement around him in 2018, and there was virtually no excitement in 2022. He nevertheless won all of those districts that are heavily Hispanic in Texas. So if you just take that as one big case, you could basically say that things are reversing. Florida was very different. I mean, that you had Hispanics voting for Ron DeSantis, en masse. So he won. I mean, one thing that was very notable was that he won Miami-Dade County, which has Miami in it. And he won that going away. I forgot what the number was. He won it by like 10 points or something. And there was something like a 30-point swing in Miami for DeSantis. So you could definitely make an argument that there are many Hispanics that are gearing up to vote Republican. If you look at Texas, you could say that things kind of went back to normal. Or you could even say that Beto, maybe on his name, first name or nickname alone, was popular among Hispanics. But I think, if anything, that trend of more Hispanics voting for GOP kind of went backwards a little bit. But we'll see. I'll kind of stick to my guns on this, in the sense that the greatest irony of the Trump era is that the man who called Hispanics rapist will win them over into the party. Make of that what you will.
Okay, thank you. Because everyone's turning on the abortion issue now as determining the election results, and that also seems to fall on pretty clear racial default lines, because Hispanics would probably be rather against it. I'd guess because of their cliche Catholicism, right? Being more conservative than conservative whites, and blacks probably being against it as well, contradicting like popular social media accounts that are probably just churning out propaganda.
Yeah, I wouldn't take that too far, though. I would be interested to go look at the numbers on that, but I would presume that it is basically white evangelical Christians who are pro-life, even more so than Catholics. But a lot of also Hispanics, when they come to the United States, they lose the Catholicism and move to Christianity. Move to evangelical Christianity. That was kind of a Freudian slip there. Sorry. They actually become Christians by leaving the Catholic Church. But it's a little bit more complicated than that. And just by the fact that like blacks are churchgoers or something, I wouldn't read too much into that, actually.
To sort of add to what Richard said, like if you look at like referendums that states have held on abortion, like Black areas and Hispanic areas are pretty pro-choice. Maybe not as much as they vote Democrat necessarily, but like they still produce solid pro-choice majorities. I think it's basically white evangelicals and some conservative Mormons against pretty much every other demographic, even like. And I think something to keep in mind is that sort of the Catholic portion of the white working class, like they've sort of followed the mainline Protestants in secularizing very fast, and I think that's what a lot of Tradcast types don't understand. They still have this view that it's still the 1960s and like all the Catholics have 7 children and go to mass every week, while the Episcopalian and Presbyterian WASPs like have only 1 child and like don't go to and never go to church. But there's been a convergence both in North America and Europe. Like you see this in Ireland and Spain and so on. So I think that's something that's something that
you have serious fertility declines in Spain, Portugal, etc. In Italy, Catholic countries. Very true. All right, guys, let's do kind of a lightning round here. So scammers. So let's try to keep things brief as I wrap things up.
Okay. So I think you're making too many generalizations about your abortion argument, because there's a lot of people that aren't a part of organized religion that are more so pro-life than pro-choice. I think it's kind of unfair because there's a lot of people in the middle there, between the Midwest to, let's say, South. Not deep South, but I mean Tennessee.
What evidence do you have for that?
Because I'm an atheist white woman who's I'm pretty much pro-life, but on the basis of past, Plan B, I don't think that should be illegal, but I believe that majority of people who are so pro-choice, they've never had an abortion, they've never seen someone go through an abortion, and they've never personally lost a child themselves. And so usually when they go through something like that, they change. They tend to change their minds on that, right? And my grandma, she's an atheist. But at 14, she was forced an abortion in the fucking 50s, okay? Mm-hmm. Forced on her. And what's even more fucked up is that her son survived it. She had twins, didn't even know it. It was one of those back alley abortions. And to make it legal, right? Because I think just about anything should be legal. I don't believe there should be any restrictions on anything, but it is what it is. If you are taking a baby out your fucking womb, just call it what it is. You're taking a baby outside of yourself.
Murder.
Right? What do you call it? An abortion?
As an abortion, yes. You are ending an embryo's life, and that embryo will eventually become a baby, right?
Yeah.
Call it what it is. Don't sugarcoat it.
Spilled says.
Just don't just say, hey, this is completely safe. You're not going to have any mental regressions. You're not going to regret it, right? This is what's being said in mainstream media. Little girls who are scared who are 16 gets knocked up, they want to get an abortion first thing, right? As soon as they get the abortion, they're fucked up mentally, because what they see on the news, they see what people say, and on top of it, nobody's there for them mentally after that. Majority of those girls end up taking their lives. That ain't talked about. It's not. So,
well, the majority of them do not commit suicide after an abortion.
Have you?
What is it? 1 in 5 women have an abortion. I think 1 in 5. I'm calling these out off the cuff, but I mean, I think 1 in 5 abortions are actually to married couples.
Are you the same Mrs. Spencer from the news all those years ago?
Yes.
Wait, so you were an ex-Nazi, and now you're on here trying to be a pro-lifer? Didn't someone punch you in the face?
Yeah, maybe
He's the host of the space. You could be polite.
Wait, were you though? That was you?
That was me.
Oh, you're a fucking grifter, bro. I can't even take you seriously. I'm not gonna come on here and talk to some fucker that was trying to be all fucking alt-right, whatever bullshit. So what changed?
Okay.
Can I ask what changed? Was it Milo? Did you stay the night with
No,
him?
I've never opposed abortion. I mean, I've never in my life been pro-life.
Was it only for black babies that you supported?
Shaniqua's fetus.
No, I mean I want to know what changed, bro.
Well, we all change, but
Okay.
in terms of the abortion issue,
So,
I've never thought it was realistic
how do you
or a
feel
good
about
idea
this,
to
though? Because I'm
ban
kind of
abortions.
myself. I kind of want to know where you stand on that.
Well, I'll tell you what I think. Roe v. Wade was pretty good, and it should
Yeah.
have stayed. And it was a reason. It had reasonable restrictions.
Was it because of how you feel about other races? Was it because
No,
of that?
that's not the primary.
Oh, I
motive.
bet it was. Bet Margaret Sanger was your fucking top bitch. I bet she was your grandma too. Wasn't she?
Margaret Sanger is a very interesting woman, and she
I
made some
think
very,
because
very
she
strong
wanted
case
to
about it.
get rid of all of the black babies. So you're down with that, right? I'm not going to sell this to a journalist later, but if you can keep the recording, what's your official comment on that?
It's being recorded, but I'm not going to answer these questions
Did
that
you
are
get Twitter blue?
highly.
Oh, you got. See, they weren't even.
Are you Christian scammers?
No, I'd like to say atheist, but never was really raised in anything. I'm gonna know what Richard is. Hey, Richard, did you ever join?
Where are you calling from? I'm obsessed
my
with your accent.
You're calling from Louisiana, I believe.
Who, me?
So fierce.
Yes,
No,
that's where I would place
Ohio.
your accent.
Oh, where are you from, girl?
I'm from the South. I don't know. I grew up in several different places. Hey, where do you live, Richard?
What state are you in? I want to know.
Oh, I don't feel comfortable telling Richard that.
Hey, scammer, how does it feel
I'm not
knowing
rich.
you
I'm not
know
rich.
that you're going
What
to
am I gonna
burn in
do to you?
hell as an atheist, just like those unbaptized aborted babies?
I feel amazing. I hope I'm not with Richard though. I don't like Nazis.
You can still be baptized. You can become Catholic earlier.
Yeah,
that's true.
I have to find a cute Mexican mommy though. Anyways,
what?
Okay.
What was
girl?
This is kind of degenerating. So let's try to
Better
go
than
quickly.
St.
I'm getting a little
Kyle.
tired. Heresy or heresy. Okay, that's a funny name. You're up. Heresy.
Hi,
All right,
Heresy.
we lost heresy.
Oh, God.
Okay.
Oh, my God. They wear a doll head.
Drain
doll heads
Doom.
rise up.
AHA. Drain Doom.
Also
Wait,
doll
I don't want to talk now. I want to wait.
No, say something, girl. What's up?
What's up?
How are
What's
you,
up,
boy?
guys? I'm
Do
from
you have-
Florida, and I'm so happy to be here.
Oh my God,
Good.
how far are you from Mar-a-Lago? Did you go? Are people partying in the streets?
I'm actually not from Florida. I'm from Brazil, but I'm in Florida, so I don't know nothing about Florida. I know about New York and California, but I don't know shit about Florida.
Are people in the streets gagging boots for Trump?
Of course, definitely.
I wish my friend is there right now. I'm so mad looking at his pictures in the group chat.
Oh my God, you're supposed to be
The
here.
rally was boring.
How is it?
Boring
What?
speech.
Come on! He was calm. He wasn't
He's
high
sleepy.
this time. He didn't take his Vyvanse. He took his pregnenolone. He's chill. He's vibing. It's like a solid, sturdy speech. What do you mean? It wasn't boring.
Of course.
He set the world on fire when he announced in 2015, and he put the world to sleep in 2022.
Oh my God! The elevator speech was.
This is one of the only things I agree with you on, Richard. Thank you for saying that.
All right.
I mean, what is he supposed to do? Put on a production? No.
And
You said what, Richard?
You're a paleo-libertarian. You've got is that Ron Paul in your photo?
Yes, sir, it is. Yes, sir.
All right. You've got the floor, the Chad.
I don't know what I just heard. With the woman, that was just weird. I mean, wow. I mean, but the dude is boring. Trump is boring. Like I said.
Woman?
The woman that was talking about abortion and all this. I don't know where that came from.
Oh.
Well,
Okay,
look,
let me say something
look.
about it.
I'll
I think,
actually defend her. She's this is an open forum. She can express herself. It's
yeah, definitely. And I think like, and I think about the abortion thing that people change their minds. It's so fucking true because like a friend of mine, she was like completely like pro-choice, and now she's just like, oh my god, I hate every single person that is pro-choice in the world because she almost died. But I think
Hmm.
like that's 100% true about the abortion thing. But
Well, I'm
I don't know. I
pro-life,
am.
but
I
I,
know.
I
I'm not
just want it to
pro-choice
be
or
a state
pro-life.
issue, pretty much. I want decentralization, national divorce. I mean, let's do this. You know.
okay. What I mean, that seems to be kind of like a process as opposed to an end. Like, let's decentralize the country towards what? I
I
mean,
mean,
don't.
it's pretty much like this. It's like, I mean, we can have blue states and red states. You know, if you want to be a black nationalist, you can have your own land. If you want to be a white nationalist, you can have your own land. You just can't be in any really higher positions. And I mean, that's that's what I think. And then we can only come together for like military reasons, really.
Okay.
But that's
We
it.
got Robert Nozick in the house.
Well, we kind of. Okay, I
Go
mean, we kind of have this to a degree. I mean, there is a very big difference between living in California and living in Wyoming.
Hmm.
But you want, I take it that you want greater sovereignty, but we would be aligned in a kind of military alliance, I guess, between sovereign states. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that we only come together for war reasons, but we're different states, we're different countries, we're different units.
Okay. What if a state wanted to have slavery?
Can't hear you.
What if a state wanted to have slavery?
I don't think that would happen in 2022, but it's very interesting with the issue of slavery because you did have the slave states and northern states, but you still had states that pretty much ended slavery. I mean, my literal solution to it is either you have to funnel weapons to the slaves so they can just have rebellions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or there are countries that ended slavery without rebellions, right? So it's either
Right.
going to be very violent or it's going to be peaceful but very
But by
economically
what you
crazy.
just said, you find slavery to be such a moral embarrassment or disgrace
Yes, sir.
that you would want to give weapons to undermine the functioning sovereign state. I mean, if it's a sovereign state, shouldn't you just leave them alone? According to your ideology? I mean, how could you
You can
tell
make
Alabama
that
what to do?
argument. You can make that argument, but I mean, like I said, you can do what you think, because that's what the whole abolitionists said, that we need to succeed from the South and leave them.
Yeah.
But some people said
Many said
that.
that. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Many abolitionists said that. Just to
Yeah, thank
be a
you.
little. Yeah.
But I'm just saying that when you're doing any moral act, like, I mean, I'm not gonna get the government involved in it. But if I have weapons, if I have things, I'm giving them to the slaves so we can do Haiti. You know what I'm saying? But it doesn't have to be.
Isn't the government just who has the guns, though?
Can't hear you.
Isn't the government just who has the monopoly on guns, though, or who has
Man,
the most
monopoly,
guns?
but they don't all have the weapons or the thing. That's why slave rebellions was a thing back then.
Well,
I mean,
let me
most of them
know- Let me
failed.
know this though. What about
Actually, they all
roads?
failed.
What about
Go ahead,
roads?
sir.
Roads.
You said what about roads?
What about roads?
What about
Is
roads?
that the equivalent of slavery in a way, like a government building a road? I mean, what an abomination!
I'm not saying that's an abomination. I'm just saying there's a way to have roads without taxes. There's a way to privatize some things.
Okay,
Right.
so you want to privatize?
There's a way to have roads and toll roads without using taxes.
Toll roads.
Thank you. Toll roads. Thank you.
Everything's going to be a toll road. You greedy capitalists are just going to be taking money out of their pocket at every second. What is going on here?
You want to be
Wow. All
honest? I'm
right.
being
This is kind
honest
of a
with you,
blast
man.
from the past. I remember all these conversations with paleo-libertarians back in the day.
Why do you call it paleo?
Well, it's a paleo-conservative. There was a paleo-conservative libertarian alliance in the 1990s based around Murray Rothbard, Samuel Francis, Tom Fleming,
Yeah.
Lou Rockwell, many others. And they kind of synthesized. It was very similar to the alt-right in a way. And they kind of like synthesized their views. And
Richard, I'm
for a
wondering,
time.
how do you define alt-right, you personally?
Well, I don't think alt-right could really, it can be defined outside of that crazy moment in 2016. I mean, I
Right.
started with the alt-right I think when I was at Talkies Magazine, I believe, and it was a kind of a catch-all phrase that in many ways for people that were kind of paleo-libertarian. I mean, I think that was a motive, within the alt-right, as I use that term, and I founded AlternativeRight.com and so on in 2010. Then the alt-right kind of took off in the underground, and I think it was just kind of cool label that you could put on the 2016 Trump movement. But I don't think it really exists outside of that. I mean, if I were to define my ideology now, I would definitely use different terms. I think the alt-right kind of is in the past.
Gotcha.
My
That makes sense.
understanding is
At
that the
this point.
term is that the idea of the alt-right grew out of this sort of merger between the Pat Buchanan wing of conservatism with this sort of like edgy alt art writing scene that grew out of it.
Alt-right.
Like Jim Goad. I know you were on Jim Goad's podcast, I believe, Richard.
I know Jim Goad.
Him, Boyd Rice, Peter Sotos, Michael Moynihan. Not Michael Moynihan from Reason Magazine, the real Michael Moynihan. Those guys sort of like
something. I think there was something there too. I think those were kind of precursors. I remember the H.L. Mencken Club in 2010 and 2011, and I believe the H.L. Mencken Club still exists. I was a co-founder of it in 2008, I believe, and or maybe it was even 2007. And at that point, it was kind of the Paul Gottfried Society, and so it had a paleo-libertarian bent. But in 2010 and 2011, I mean, we had this just like influx of young people, and it was very interesting. And it was a kind of merger of some of those names you mentioned and that kind of sensibility, but also a lot of people who were interested in race realism and some edgy libertarians, some people like that. It was intellectual at that time. I don't think there was a candidate. I mean, if there was one, I think it was people getting excited about Ron Paul. And then I kind of, I don't know, wasn't really involved with that scene too intimately for a little while. And then by 2016, things had just kind of taken on a life of their own and exploded. And with Trump. And I think at this point, although there are definitely precursors, and that includes like Goad and company, but I do think the alt-right was a kind of crazy moment that even before Trump took office, I mean, I think that was when it was at its height. And it was a kind of like reversal of a lot of political dynamics, because it was, previously it had been like, you have a campaign, you go on mainstream media, and then social media reacts to that. But the Trump campaign, even beyond the alt-right, was a kind of like social media first campaign. So people were getting their information from Facebook and his Facebook page, and then that was affecting the mainstream media. So it was, I think that's how I would describe it. But I think it is a kind of, it exists in time. I mean, I think these things still exist now. They're just more fragmented. And QAnon was a kind of like grotesque parody of the alt-right in many ways. It was online first, generated on 4chan and pro-Trump. And it dwarfed the alt-right as well. It was much larger and kind of more lasting in a way.
It was more lasting, but it was also weird. Like, I mean, they really believe this man is the Messiah. Like, I mean, even Alex Jones had to call him out. Like, it was embarrassing.
But, the alt-right in 2016 kind of believed that he was the Messiah. He was called the God Emperor, over and over again.
Yeah.
I mean, it was in quote, it was in scare quotes, but it was kind of real.
Well, I think a lot of the sort of dirtbag turning against Trump that happened around 2018 and the support of various Democratic candidates happened out of a disappointment that Trump was not enough of a Nazi.
Well, I mean, are you just referring to me? Because, not many people followed my lead.
I'm not
Richard
subtweeting
Spencer.
you, Richard.
Richard Spencer,
Okay.
are you still racist? Yes or no?
I don't know what that word means.
Who did build the pyramids, Richard?
Yes, I
And the
wonder.
trolling begins already.
Who built those?
And
Who
the
built
trolling
those?
begins.
It's an interesting story because at some point, certainly there were sub-Saharan Africans who ruled Egypt, but built the pyramids were going back 4,000 or 5,000 people. I would imagine that this was a Caucasian group. But anyway,
Mhm.
What were we talking about? Alt-right.
The
I
history
feel
of
like
the
Ann
alt-right.
Coulter sort of had a similar path to Mr. Spencer.
She did.
Although
she would not. I don't think she can bring herself to vote Democratic. And keep in mind, Ann Coulter, even though she was kind of
Wait, are you a
alt-right,
Democrat?
yeah, I mean, I vote for Democrats. Yeah,
Why?
Oh
'cause
my
they're
god,
better.
it's such a lot.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. That's kind of
Yeah.
fierce. I mean, so
I know.
you're liberal. You're a leftist.
Sure.
Are you a commie? Do you like Marx?
Oh my god.
I do like Marx, but Marx wasn't a commie.
Wait, I was not kept up on the lore. I'm so sorry. That's kind of giving, honestly.
Marx died long before communism. So to associate him with the Soviet Union is a bit unfair. But yeah. Where was I? Alt-right lore. Oh, Ann Coulter. I mean, keep in mind, Ann Coulter was a kind of hardcore but traditional conservative. Like, she's coming from the conservative movement. She is dedicated to the pro-life issue. She's more or less for free markets and so on. I think she took on the immigration issue with reckless abandon in 2016 and maybe earlier than that. I remember there was like a 2014 CPAC where she said, unless we solve immigration, there are going to be conservative death squads, right-wing death squads. Didn't she say that? So she was kind of on that edgy version of the alt-right, but I can't imagine her voting for a Democrat. I mean, she's a conservative movement monster.
She's such a glamorous queen. I'm obsessed with her.
Yeah, I like Ann Coulter too. She's cool.
And a Christian.
She has some good books.
God, I could never stand conservative. It's just such an anti-intellectual movement, and it's just so like, I don't know. It just doesn't have a vision, and
Because
it's just
leftists
kind
are
of
so
reactionary.
intellectual.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah.
Like,
Richard, do you consider
like-
yourself like a race realist liberal? Like, would that be an accurate assessment of your ideology? What would you call yourself?
Well, I mean, I do. I guess you could fairly call me a race realist. I mean, I think that's a very
Do you
real
like
thing.
Steve
I've
Saylor?
published. Yeah, I think Steve Saylor is fun. I've always liked Steve Saylor. But yeah, I mean, again, my concerns, like what I actually care about, is just a lot bigger than the stuff.
Like what? What do you care about?
Well, we're moving towards Apolloism. I mean, this is
Apolloism, like
yes,
like paganism.
yes.
Apolloism.
What?
I
I'm
can't.
glad I'm shocking you all.
You are? Oh my gosh. Okay. Let me Google that real quick.
Same.
Okay.
Do you want that to be like a dominant religion in the culture, and why?
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully around the world.
I have a serious question for you, Richard.
Okay.
How shocked were you when Roland Martin informed you that Egypt was in fact in Africa?
That was pretty funny. I believe I said that Egyptians were white, which is maybe not the best. Maybe not. Although not inaccurate entirely, at least for founders. But yeah, I mean, it was maybe the best response in that context of that kind of hostile interview. But yes, I do think that there are people out like Egypt, like African Egyptology is kind of similar to the Kanye stuff about like whatever he believes. I don't know exactly what he believes. I think some people, like people in that documentary that Kyrie Irving mentioned, I believe they think the Jews of the Bible were sub-Saharan Africans. I think Kanye, again, to be, I'm trying to accurately represent what he thinks. I think that he believes that Africans were almost like the Cushites or something. They were like a tribe of Israel. But I don't think he is. I remember
I don't think
watching
he has
an
stable
interview.
beliefs. He's just saying.
Yeah, that's fair, but he kind of does believe in something, like however weird and it might be, he has a belief system. I remember seeing him shake his head when Lex Friedman said, "This reminds me of Black Hebrewite stuff," and he kind of shook his head. So I'll take him at his word. I think he believes that like he's the tribe of Cush or something like this, or African Americans or Africans are. And then he also kind of said, but everyone comes from Africa, and so the Jews come from Africa, so he becomes a Jew that way too. I mean, who knows exactly? It is rather weird, but I do think he sincerely believes those things.
Question for you, Richard. I know you've been in favor of kind of on the side of Ukraine in this global position here. Are you at all concerned about escalation and possible nuclear ramifications for what's happening right now, or is that something that you're not quite too concerned about?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm concerned about it, but it is what it is. I mean, in the sense that, I don't think we should just say, oh, well, let's give up on Ukraine and let's get out of NATO so we don't risk nuclear war or something like that. I don't believe in those things. We're in it. We have certain responsibilities. I think in many ways, actually, I think a conflict with Russia is just what the doctor ordered, you could say. Once there is a kind of, conflict is natural and it's defining. And I think it could actually revive the West in a way. I think it could bring a kind of realism to the way we operate, that, unipolarity or whatever just wouldn't. So yeah, I don't really quite think of it in those kind of paleo ways where everyone's just kind of allergic to conflict, or paleo conservatives like the Chad who believes that, if only we could just trade and live in tiny little statelets, there'd be no problems in the world or something like that. I've never believed that.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but I mean, millions of people might die from a World War III. And I mean, like I said, that's not good.
Well,
So,
they're going to die anyway. and
Go ahead.
now they can die with meaning.
But don't you think just preventing that, just not having a war, just letting Ukraine and Russia fight it out is just, we can't just let that be?
I don't know. Sounds a little wimpy there, Chad. What, are you afraid of something?
Not afraid of anything. Just don't want millions of people to die. You know,
we're all gonna die.
And Russia and the American government is more of a threat to me than Russia. So, you know.
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand your perspective. I'm being a bit provocative, as I think you can tell.
It's all
I
good.
I understand your perspective. I've definitely, talking with you, it is a blast from the past, because there was a time in my life where I was surrounded by paleo libertarians, so I kind of know the way you think. And
You were on my show before. You were on my show years ago. The Chad
What was
Factor.
the name of the Chad Factor?
Yeah, that's
I
me.
remember that.
Yes, that was some good times.
So what year was that?
That was like back in 2010, 2011. I had you on. I had Heimbach, Parrots.
Whoa.
Yeah. The White Voice and Joe. Yeah, I've had all those guys on. I had Francis Cress Welsing. I had a lot of black people, white people. Good conversation. It was good.
Wow. So has that kind of gone by the wayside, or do you keep up with the podcast?
I do the YouTube thing, but because I had so many controversial guests, they shut down my show. Okay. They shut down my show and I had to revamp it again. But they don't play about censorship. So I was canceled before people noticed cancel culture. So
wow. That is interesting.
Very interesting.
Oh my God, this is such a blast from the past. Wow.
Hey, Richard, as a newly minted a liberal, as a kind of newly minted liberal, what do you think about censorship issue in specific? Does that bother you at all, or do you feel like that's kind of a normal part of this conflict that I guess people have with their government? Do you feel like that's like a natural course type of thing? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've actually done some monologue type things. I haven't written this as an essay, and I should. There are recordings out there where I discuss the censorship issue. It's pretty big. Obviously, I don't want to personally be censored. I mean, obviously, I kind of have a horse in this race. I have been censored from YouTube. I've been censored from Twitter, although just kind of briefly. I was one of the first major ones to get kicked off of Twitter, and I was kicked off for about a month or so. So it is an issue. That being said, I don't have this kind of free speech absolutism issue at all. And I guess I could go into that, although it might take me a long time to really make my argument. Long story short, the common law conception of free speech is very different than the conception of free speech that came out of Oliver Wendell Holmes. So no real government has ever really been pro free speech. And so it is a kind of fact of life in that sense. I do think in terms of, wild ideas and so on, I would be against censorship of people stating their opinion. In terms of actual issues of, you could say, public health and public health writ large, that is people spreading just obviously false information and even profiting off it. And I am not, to be frank, opposed to the government censoring that. The other issue is that, you have to want to say something. And I don't know. I mean, I look back with some nostalgia over like 2016, but, don't really have a right to just act like a deranged teenager. You don't have the right to harass people, and you don't have the right to do that in public. You don't, just because it's on the internet, you don't like have this expanded rights where you can just do anything. And
So it
I
seems
think
like you take sort of a common good approach to free speech, like in terms of like
yeah, I take a
censoring.
common good approach, but it's probably a little bit. I take a common good approach in terms of some stuff like, people spreading misinformation about COVID or something like that. I take a bit of a deeper approach. I don't know. I guess you could call it a platonic approach when it comes to congealing a population and so on. I do think that there's going to have to be some kind of censorship involved in all of that.
Richard,
if you believe they're good books, you believe they're bad books. I mean, I don't really know what to say. Also, in terms of the Russia issue, I mean, there is absolutely no question at all that Russia successfully, to some extent, but at least in their attempt, they were attempting to just pollute the discourse. And, you don't have the right to do that.
But Richard,
can I ask how you mean by pollute the discourse as far as a foreign country goes?
Engaging in bad faith discussion, putting forth nonsense, putting forth basically psychological operations via social media.
So I guess my question would be, would it be any different if one nation were to do it as opposed to an international body of nations doing it?
What?
Or multinational NGOs doing it?
There's not necessarily a difference. I mean, what are you getting at exactly?
I mean, you could talk about the way that the UN influences geopolitics, or at least the way that geopolitics is talked about, or the EU or the WHO. I mean, I think a lot of people that are listening to this right now are probably not necessarily aligns with maybe a lot of your views on COVID necessarily, and probably think that there is a lot of funkery going on with it, and a lot of vested foreign interests. Say a lot of people might bring up the World Economic Forum, for example. So something of that nature. How would you compare
there's no
that
difference.
to
I
Russia?
mean, if some global NGO is trying to pollute discourse, then I'm just as opposed to it as Russia trying to pollute discourse.
But I guess my question would be, who defines what constitutes polluting discourse?
The state. I mean, there has to ultimately, like, you're a citizen of or subject of a particular order. And I would hope that there would be enlightened people, not that our elite class is anything to write home about. I don't think it is at all. But, you would hope that there would be some kind of enlightened class of people maintaining the course. Kind of the ship of state is headed in the right direction. And that actually is going to involve censorship on some level. It's also going to involve kind of promoting particular ideas.
So you would support sort of like a Western counterpart to the Chinese way of doing things, insofar as most of us understand the Chinese way of doing things. I understand.
Yes,
it's
but
oversimplified.
if Westerners doing things, it's going to be really different than the Chinese way of doing things.
Okay, for sure.
But I understand your point, yes. But I'm not like, no, I don't think that, what to the degree to which I understand what's going on in China, there's a lot to, it's not very desirable. People criticize the police and they're arrested immediately or something. I mean, maybe some of these stories are exaggerated, but no, I would not be that draconian.
Okay, cool.
But on the social media companies and all that, I mean, I look at social media companies as being wings of the government anyway. So,
Well,
stopping
they
them.
are and they aren't. I mean, I
Go ahead, sir.
understand that argument, and they obviously benefit from the government in the sense that they're using the pipes of the internet.
Mhm.
And yes, there's no question that they benefit from section. Well, God, I keep forgetting this section. What is the
230,
section?
230.
230. Exact. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Chad Factor. They absolutely benefit from not having liability in that way. No question. So, but
Mhm.
I think it's a little bit much to say that they're an arm of the government. And I think it's actually misleading to say that because, like, I think the big three networks, or even the big four with the actual government TV, PBS, that was much more the arm of the government in
Mhm.
a 20th century technological society. I think these social media companies are viewed as at least potentially, but in many ways actually a threat to any kind of civil order. I think they are
Okay.
out of control. You don't have Tom Brokaw or Walter Cronkite just giving you a message. I mean, that the level of power that Walter Cronkite possessed is unfathomable in many ways. His
Mhm.
ability to, you know, criticize for 30 seconds the Vietnam War, and public opinion changes by 10 points overnight. I might be
Right.
exaggerating there a little bit, but I'm not exaggerating by a
But I
lot.
understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And social media is kind of out of control from the perspective of the government and any kind of elite class. It's something that they haven't really cracked that nut, and it changes it. I think I understand what you're saying. Like, clearly Twitter benefits from the government. Like, that's a fair point. But to say that it's just like it's like a funnel of government propaganda, I think is really misleading.
Well, what I'm saying is that I'm saying that they are being used, they are working together, and this is not just your social media companies. I'm glad you talked about the media, PBS. It's the corporations. They are an extension wing of the state, federal government, and wing. They're not private companies, and
Yes. But
and
like
that yes, sir.
CBS, like the degree to which CBS, ABC, NBC, and obviously PBS
Yes.
were just like up the government's ass. And I
Hmm.
like to even make these statements about Twitter being like government, like, oh, they were on the side of the Democrats in the 2020 election. I kind of agree with that. I think that's I
Thank you.
basically okay. But like, to even compare that to the degree to which the big three networks promoted like government propaganda in the 20th century is to just totally miss the point. Like, CBS News was so much more government propaganda than like Facebook. It's not even funny. And Facebook again kind of goes out of control. Yeah, they might be like censoring more conservative groups than they are liberal groups. I imagine that that is the case, but again, they have these groups exist. I mean, this space is happening right now. And like in CBS, just the monolithic power of a grandfatherly figure to tell you what like it is, like, this is what you think, this is how
Right.
it goes, this is right, this is wrong. You we don't we can't even estimate that power because we don't even have those figures anymore. I mean, who is a unifying national figure? We have polarized figures. We have Rachel Maddow or Tucker Carlson. We don't have Tom Brokaw or Peter Jennings or
Okay.
Walter Cronkite, or Dan Rather or whatever. Those were like official voices, and we don't have any. I can't name someone like that. I mean, maybe Oprah, but not really. Dwayne The Rock Johnson. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
know,
like, we definitely don't have unifying political figures, and I mean, to your point about Dwayne The Rock Johnson, we really don't have much in the way of unifying cultural figures anymore
Yeah.
either. People generally go toward their own sort of cultural niche, pop culture niche nowadays. There really is no such thing as pop culture anymore.
Yes.
Like in the
There's
80s,
no pop
everyone
music.
loved Michael Jackson.
Yeah, there's no pop music anymore.
Right,
Like
right.
maybe I've talked about this, I think, on other spaces. I mean, maybe Billie Eilish, but I think that's kind of a reach. And I think she's kind
Dua
of,
Lipa, guys. Dua Lipa is a pop singer. Like, she's like pop. She's like definitely pop.
okay, I have heard of Dua Lipa. I cannot name a single song. Now,
I used to
maybe
be a
that's
fan
my,
of her, but yeah, she's definitely pop. Yeah.
well, I know she's pop.
Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift, maybe. I mean,
Yeah,
I think
maybe.
there's some people who approach that level, but like there's no unifying band
Yeah,
that
that's
appeals to everyone. Like, you
There
know,
never
again,
was.
I don't think I can, even with Taylor Swift, I think I could probably recognize a song. Like if I heard one, I'd be like, oh, I bet that's a Taylor Swift song.
That's because
But
The Beatles were unifying.
yes, the Beatles. One article that I hopefully will publish soon. I've had this article burning a hole in my pocket for like 5 months now. U2, that was an alternative band, yet it had mass appeal, and it was a kind of like in the in the turn of the 80s to 90s, it was like an expression of the end of the Cold War and Americanization. And I don't, again, I don't think any band rises. I mean, again, there are popular bands, or you might, AHA, like you might be a fan of Dua Lipa. That's great. But like it, just someone who I've been on this earth for 44 years, like the level at which musical tastes were unified previously is just
yeah, I agree.
uncomparable.
Definitely. Yes.
Yeah. And now people are like, they have their favorite, like, SoundCloud, independent musician.
That's so true. That's so true. I was like discussing this with my mom.
Yeah, like Richard, I'm sure you're not very into Camera Obscura.
What, is that a band?
Yeah.
I've never heard of them. Are they good?
They're pretty good. They're Scottish.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a cool
if you like
name for a
U2,
band.
you probably won't like Camera Obscura, but you should check them out anyway.
Okay. It is a cool name.
Yeah.
I think at least for people under 40, sort of the unifying pop culture is actually foreign. Like, at least like for like millennials and Zoomers, like anime is pretty universally popular, like across the sort of political or like socio-demographic spectrum. But like
that is
anime's real popular across the world. Yes, sir.
Well, I think
That
a
is
lot of this.
crazy.
Well, I think a lot of what this gets to is the mainstreaming of the alternative.
Yes.
And in converse, the making countercultural the mainstream, making the mainstream, or what used to be mainstream, the sort of new counterculture, and that's why in like Dime Square you'll see this like resurgence of this like caricature of an old conservative lifestyle that really never fully existed.
In Dime Square? What are you referring to exactly?
You don't know what Dime Square is?
No.
Damn, man, you are 44 years old, man.
What is
old head?
I'm an old head. It's fine if you want to say it. Yeah, I mean, I can take the punishment. But what is Dime Square?
It's like, I don't know, it's fucking Chinatown podcast Disneyland in New York.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Isn't it Manhattan? Right?
I don't know. But you know what Richard, do you know what the kids
Are you talking about
listening to
Times
nowadays?
Square? You're not
Dime
talking about
Square.
Midtown Manhattan. There's Dime Square. You're talking about like a little neighborhood?
I guess.
Well, you don't even know
I
what you're
always
talking
assume
about.
that Dime Square is just Times Square, but with a lot of hot women. You know, dimes.
Ah, okay.
But apparently that's not where it comes from.
Well, you've clearly never been there.
No, I haven't, but I understand that's the hip young thing nowadays.
Okay. There are always some cool little neighborhoods in Manhattan. I mean, some of them are like 2 or 4 blocks, and they kind of have a particular vibe to them. Yeah. But you can find some hot women in Manhattan, that's for damn sure. All right, guys. Okay,
Can you
real
find a
quick.
good burger in Manhattan?
What?
Can you find a good burger in Manhattan?
Yes, you can find it in many different places, in fact.
Woo, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, real quick, Ross, you have a question?
I'd just like to say I only heard a few snippets of Trump's announcement that he's going to become president, but he mentioned that he had people from the left coming over to the right and voting for him. And I remember a video of an African American man who said that whenever he went to a Trump rally, he felt exceptionally welcome. I think that would be an important thing to play on. Anyone is welcome to a Trump rally. Come, listen, be welcomed.
All right.
All right.
AHA, you have the last word. You raised your hand too.
Oh, me? Who?
Well, yes. No, the other AHA in the audience.
Never mind. Sorry.
The
All right.
last word is nigger.
No. Do not. All right.
Oh.
All right, guys. Listen. All right. We get, you get banned when I get banned when you do this kind of stuff. And, I'm pretty laid back. I don't care if people want to let their hair down or whatever, but just don't do it because I'm going to pay for it. So anyway, all right, guys. All right. Well, okay. Magic Mike, you're desperate. All right. There you go, man. Speak your piece, but I got to go soon.
Yo, hey, how you doing, man? I just came on here because I had a couple questions.
Okay, real quick.
All right,
because we're wrapping it up.
Okay, have you heard of the reparations rally in Washington D.C.? And what do you think about it?
When does that happen? I've not heard about it. When is it happening?
I think that happened on November 5th. It was
okay.
It was a reparations rally in Washington D.C. and it was for foundational Black Americans trying to get their reparations. I just wanted to know what you thought about it and your
Well, look, I have to. This might surprise some people. I kind of get the idea of reparations. It seems to be just, it's just a direct payment, presumably, for people who would be directly descendants of who are directly descendants of slaves. And I to be honest, I'm not that terribly opposed to it. I mean, it kind of makes sense, and maybe this would be a way of just kind of closing that issue.
Okay, yeah, I can respect that. So, just to follow up on that, what's the amount you think people should get? Like, you think it should be per person, per household? You know what I'm saying?
I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. I mean, I think if you make it too vague, then it becomes this we're just redistributing wealth from different races. I think you would really have to say you are descendants of slaves, and this was a wrong, and we're just kind of canceling out the books. This is it. I think it should be done in that manner. But I mean, certainly the government is spending all sorts of trillions on all these government programs. Maybe they should just do one that it just makes sense, and you can just kind of if that would be a way to move on, I think that would be worth it.
Heck yeah, I respect that. I know you got to go and stuff, but the homie Ryan Colt, he had a question for you. I don't know if you got enough time or not.
Okay, I'll talk to Ryan real quick.
Appreciate that.
Sure.
Hey man, I don't care what they say about you, man. You's all right.
I appreciate that. I will definitely always listen to people. That's one thing I'll say about myself. If you have something to say, I'll give you a listen.
Thank you, Mr. Rich.
All right, Ryan. Yeah, you have far.
Okay, I just had one question, but really two. But two, I'll have a follow up one after this one. Okay, so are you aware that as a white man, your penis is significantly smaller than mine? Like I could hurt my wife if I fuck her. Like,
oh my
god. Right. I hate to end on that one.
You have a good one, Richard.
All right. All right. All done in good fun, but he has to go. All right, guys. Good conversation. And I appreciate everyone, particularly those who spoke. And have a good evening. All right. Ciao.
All right. Don't give up my social security number, Richard.
I will not do that. I have no idea what that's a reference to. All right.
Thanks for the space, Richard. That was great. Thanks for answering those questions.
Bye.
Right.
Well, thank you
Bye.
for hosting this. Have a good day.
Thank you for hosting, unironically.
Unironically. See you guys later.